Good morning. My name is Barbara Fuller, and as Chair of the Board, I welcome you to this April 15th, 2025 working session of the Washtenaw County Board of Road Commissioners. Our office coordinator, Aaron Smith, will describe how our meetings operate, how to access the agenda packet, and how people may participate remotely.
Thanks, Chair Fuller. There are multiple ways to make public comment during today's working session, whether you're joining us in person or virtually. If you're here in person and would like to make public comment, please fill out the sign-in sheet now. If you're joining us virtually, we will ask you to raise your hand at the appropriate time in the agenda.
Thank you, Aaron. I now call this April 15th, 2025 working session to order and ask Aaron to call the roll.
Chair Barb Fuller.
Present.
Vice Chair Rod Green.
Present.
Commissioner Gloria Yamas.
Present.
Commissioner Joanne McCollum.
Present.
And Commissioner Jeff Smurs.
Present.
And then the following directors are in attendance. Our Managing Director, Matt Washtenaw, our Director of Engineering and County Highway Engineer, Brent Schlack, and Director of Finance, Dan Ackerman.
Very good. I now ask you, no, hang on. I would accept a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
So move. Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, Aaron, if you would, please.
Commissioner Rod Green.
Yes.
Commissioner Joanne McCollum.
Yes.
Commissioner Gloria Yamas.
Yes.
Commissioner Jeff Smurs.
Yes.
And Commissioner Burt Fuller.
Yes, the agenda is approved as presented. Next up is public comment. This is the time set aside on the agenda to receive comments from the public. This is not intended to be a period for dialogue. Each person will be allotted 3 minutes to address the board. Aaron will explain how people may be recognized to offer comments.
Since this is a hybrid meeting with both in-person and virtual attendees, we will take turns between those attending in person and virtually. At this time, there's no one in person or virtual that would like to make public comment.
Very good. We will move along then with our working session agenda, and I will turn the meeting over to Managing Director Matt Washtenaw.
Good morning, Commissioners, and thank you, Chair. We have with us this morning, we'll go ahead and kick off with Dan Ackerman and representatives from Plant Moran that will go through our audit findings. Go ahead, Dan.
Good morning, board, and welcome to my favorite working session of the year. So, we have thrown lots of numbers at you, which I love and could talk about for days on end, but hopefully you've had opportunity to review all the materials and have your questions ready. This is kind of a dialogue presentation, both Plant Moran and then my presentation this afternoon. So feel free to ask questions as they come up. We're more than happy to answer those. As you know, we go through an annual audit every year, and Plant Moran is our auditors. They do a fine job and keep myself and my staff on our toes. And I think 2024 was a great year for the Road Commission from a fiscal perspective, and they're here to share some good things with you. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Jean and Phil to present the financials.
Good morning.
Good
Hi, Jean.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
I am great today. It is my daughter's 21st birthday and I'm going to Disney tomorrow. So if I get a little sidetracked, so I'm excited, and looking
Have a
forward
great
to the nice weather of spring.
May the lines be short.
So again, I'm Jean and with me is Phil. We're going to go through some information that you received. I do want to send apologies for Keith. He is actually on a Disney cruise, so we're all jealous of that too, but he sends his regards. So he loves to be here too. But what I'm going to cover is you would have received the financial statement and a letter in your packet. I'm going to highlight the letter and then Phil's going to highlight the graphs. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, just let us know and we're happy to answer those. So with the letter, I'm going to focus on this page, really talking about our responsibilities. And this is a standard letter. These are the required communications. So our responsibility is to complete the audit, to express an opinion that the financial statements are materially correct. So that doesn't mean to the dollar, we're going to do tests, we're going to highlight more risk areas, understand the controls and go through those various items. But again, you do have a clean opinion, which is the highest level of assurance that we can provide for the audit. With that, we also do get an understanding of your IT system related to accounting for reporting and key controls. We don't give an opinion on those, but we are going to understand to evaluate the testing that we need to perform. And if we had anything to report, we would make you aware of it. and I have nothing to report. So no findings that we had. The scope, you would have received that pre-communication letter where we kind of have a conversation with the chair. We talk through just to make sure if there's anything from an audit approach that we need to be aware of. And then we do highlight information by an industry that we're going to evaluate that we've seen at other clients or just going on in the market, the operations, and would consider those audit risk when we're doing our planning. For you, one of the items that we do focus on is accounting estimates. And for you, that would be your net pension obligation and the OPEB obligation. So those are really just a point in time. It's the estimate that makes sense as of this point in time, but it can fluctuate, positive or negative, as we've seen the market fluctuate. It kind of went up and it might have went back down, it might have went back up. So just it can be impacted by the market, impacted by mortality, healthcare costs, and items like that. But again, we're very comfortable with the numbers as presented, but this is a number that can fluctuate. If you go down to a little bit more in the letter, we had no difficulties in completing the audit and no disagreements. And on the corrected and uncorrected misstatements, we had none. Again, we want to thank Dan and his team. They're always prepared for us. They answer all our questions. We may ask the same question different ways of different people. We don't want them to get comfortable. That's intentional, but I do appreciate all the assistance that we receive from everyone related to the audit. The last part of the letter is really just some legislative items. I'm not going to go through any of them, but just things that wanted to make you aware of. If you do have questions, please ask us. But with that, I think we're ready for Phil to jump into the graphs unless there's any questions on the letter.
Ask one question.
Commissioner Green?
Yes.
Thank you. What happens if there is a disagreement with management? How is that reported in your accounting?
So if we had a disagreement,
Right.
so usually what it is, a disagreement would be is if we say, we think you need to record X
Right.
under the accounting standards and Dan says, no, I'm recording Y.
Right.
If we can't come to an agreement, I need to report that to you. But if I say, hey, Dan, I think you should record it this way because that's what the accounting standards are and he agrees, then that's not a disagreement. So it's pretty rare to have disagreements because usually it means that the client isn't following what you're following. It also could impact your opinion. So let's say an organization refused to follow generally accepted accounting principles with the numbers. I can't give them a clean opinion. I'd have to say these numbers are not materially correct because again, they need to be in accordance with generally accepted accounting policies and procedures.
So is that reported in your audit?
If we had one, they'd have to be reported in this letter.
I see. Thank you.
Yep. And it could again
But they're
impact
more
that
not-
opinion if we, if I had a client that wouldn't follow generally accepted accounting principles. So
You would state that.
yes,
This is what happened.
yep.
Thank
I
you.
mean, if it's a very small amount, it's not going to rise to that. This letter is meant to cover more significant items. So if you're fighting over $10, I mean, most auditors aren't going to fight over $10, but it could happen. But again, we've never had any disagreements. Dan does a great job understanding the accounting, and that's why we didn't even have any proposed adjustments. There wasn't anything that we found that had to be corrected.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right.
All right?
Thanks, Gene. Apparently I missed the Disney invite for the team here.
As
Only one.
we.
I was gonna say, I'm the only one not going on a Disney trip after or before this or at this.
You still got Thursday. You can see if there are any openings.
Yeah. So as Gene kind of alluded to, I'm gonna be going over the financial graphs. What we try to do with these is kind of summarize your financial statements into those really key areas that we think are the most important to discuss here today.
Could I stop you just for a moment?
Yep.
Would you identify yourself?
Yeah.
There? It goes on the recording and I
Yep.
think.
So
it's-
my name is Phil Feminino. I'm the audit manager on this engagement.
And did you identify yourself, Jean?
Gene Young, audit partner.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So before we really dive into the graphs, kind of what you'll see throughout is we will comment on your fund balance and how that compares to expenses. That's usually a good way we like to show if it's healthy or not. Discuss your pension and OPEB funding percentages, kind of discuss the changes. And as Gene mentioned, really how those can fluctuate just depending on the actuarial valuation. And then really, you'll see that there was a use of fund balance of about 3.4 million. There was budgeted use of 14.4. So you did come in under that, really just because of maybe timing of projects as well as just monitoring the spending. But So not anything to be too aware of there, but we will comment on that as we go. So the first graph we do like to start off with is just looking at your balance sheet. So here, what we really point out is that you have about $40.4 million in assets. 27.4 of that is in unrestricted cash and investments. And then you have about $26 million in fund balance. So really what this is kind of indicating is that there is, that the assets of the commission are liquid and able to be spent on operations. From there, we really like to dive into the revenue of the road fund, which is the major fund, and kind of compare that over the past 5 years. So here you'll see that revenue decreased by 5.5 million, or about 7%. Now, a major portion of that decrease, or 4.5 million, relates to the state grant that you got for pension last year. So that was about 4.5 million. That was a one-time grant. We would expect to see a decrease for that. And really, you'll see a corresponding related decrease in expense of about 4.5 million, because when you received that, that was revenue, but then that was also an expense in that year. So the largest source of revenue is your Act 51 or Michigan Transportation Fund disbursements from the state. And this is what we see for all our road commissions. And that's up about 347,000 this year. Revenue from local governments and federal state sources. So this can really vary year over year. So this was a decrease, and this is where you'd see that $4.5 million decrease, because that would have been a state source revenue. So that explains some of that decrease, and that does really just vary a lot. And then in 2015, the road commission did start receiving property taxes. So the entire millage generates about 7 million. Significant portion of that goes to cities, but the road commission share has been approximately 4.5 to 5 million, as you'll see in this graph. And, is another source of revenue for the commission.
Any questions for Commissioner McCollum?
Yeah, I had a question about, when you were talking about the first graph, you said it, and like our fund balance is liquid.
Yes.
So, are there, situations where it's not liquid, or?
If it were to not be liquid, you would probably see more in accounts receivable, inventory, or those items, which aren't as easily converted. But since, as you can see from this graph, your largest source is cash and investments at 27.4 million, that would be we consider that liquid.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, we'll move on to expenses. So once again, we have a 5-year history. Expenses did increase slightly this year, about 3.7 million. And the largest expense is really going to be your road improvements. So that's your main project. And it's really depending on when you're doing those projects. So that did increase about 6.1 million. And then you'll see non-departmental did decrease. So this is where your 4.5 million, I was kind of commenting on how you had the revenue. And this is where your 4.5 million of expenses would have sat in 2023. So that's why there is that decrease there. Just because there is not that $4.5 million contribution to the pension trust this year. Or additional, I should say, from the grant.
Questions on this page for Commissioner McCollum?
Yes, the debt service, what's that?
So those would be payments on your debt. So if I recall correctly, there was the salt barn project.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, your debt's about, I think it's, oh, go ahead.
Yep, Dan Ackerman, Director of Finance. That's correct. That's our installment purchases for our trucks and our Northeast Service Center and our facility out here, our salt barn. We made the first year of our payment. That's why there's a little bit of an increase. But if you look 2020 and 2021, it was about 2.4. So, I feel like our debt service is going in the right direction.
Thank you.
Just to add to that, oftentimes we'll look at financing options for purchasing heavy equipment and or investing in facilities. So those are really the bulk of our debt service is typically heavy equipment or investments in facilities. And eventually that drops off. The financing of late, we haven't done any heavy truck financing because interest rates have been up a little, and we've had the available fund balance to cover those investments to our fleet. So that's where we're at currently.
Thank you.
Anything
And-
else, Dan? No, Jean?
Yeah, I want to add a comment. So the road fund is on what's called the modified accrual basis. So if you were to compare it to a traditional business, the debt service, the principal would be reducing the liability. But again, on the modified accrual basis, it's more of what are the current collections and what are the current expenditures. As you may recall in your financial statements, governments are required to have two methods of reporting. You have the entity-wide, which is more of that full accrual like a normal business, has the debt obligations, your pension, your OPEB. The road fund is more of here's the current revenues that you received and how did you spend them. So it is a different presentation. This would be more of how you budget. The entity-wide is how you want to forecast looking forward of what are our long-term obligations that we need to be prepared for. So governments are unique in that. If you were to hear that someone else has two sets of books, you'd be concerned with a fraud risk, but the governmental accounting does require that again, there's a full accrual picture and then there's this modified, or a lot of times it's how are the property taxes being used and spent, the state shared revenue and such. So just wanted to clarify that.
All set? Thank you, everybody. Back to you, Phil.
Yep, thank you. So the next slide is the fund balance slide. So now we're talking about the revenue expenses. We're gonna go into the fund balance. And so what we're showing here is 5-year history of fund balance as well as projecting out your next year's fund balance. And really, when we're projecting next year's, we're just taking the current years plus the budgeted use that we saw and kind of determining what's expected. So in most years, if there's revenue or when revenue exceeds expenses, it'll grow your fund balance. So you can see in 2020 through 2023, that was the case. But in 2024, there was a use of fund balance, which was expected, as I mentioned. There was about 14.1 million expected, so 3.7 was the actual use of fund balance. And of your fund balance, it's broken up into several categories. You'll see that most of yours is in the two least restrictive categories, as we would call them. So you have assigned and unassigned. Assigned fund balance, there is no legal restriction on how it can be used, but the road commission does have a plan for it. That's really showing what your plan would be. So that's for 2025 budget. If you're expecting to use some of it, you'll assign that. Capital improvements, if there's certain projects you want to assign monies to, as well as employee retirement, OPEB, those are all different assignments that the road commission has. And then unassigned is just available for whatever you need. Non-spendable is the last category. You'll see there was no restricted this year, but there's a little bit in committed, but non-spendable is really just anything that's in prepaids or inventory. So that money has been spent. It's just going to be used as the prepaids are earned or through the period or as the inventory is used.
Hang on.
Yep.
Any questions? I have one.
Yep.
You project a fund balance of 21, but in Dan's document, you're projecting approximately 18.8. Can you help me reconcile?
So the 21,245 would be if there were no adjustments for the first quarter. The 18.8 is after all the adjustments for the first quarter that we'll talk about a little later.
Thank you.
And that is a good reminder.
Thanks. Sorry, Phil, go ahead.
No problem. And then the last couple items that we just like to discuss, so we like to look at total fund balance as a percent of expenditures. That's 36%. It was 43% last year, but once again, when you're using fund balance, it's going to decrease the fund balance as well as your expenses are going to be higher. So we would expect to see that to decrease. That's still considered healthy to us, as well as your unassigned and assigned. The two least restrictive, as we talked about, is about 31% of expenditures. Last year was 35%. Still really considered healthy. Really shows the funds that you have available if you had like an emergency expense. That's what those unassigned and assigned are really kind of showing.
So is the 21,245, what percentage did you estimate that was?
We did not do the 20.
Okay, that's fine. That's the thing that I watch, so go ahead.
Any questions before we go to the next?
I don't see any.
So now we'll kind of talk about, as Gene alluded to, the pension and OPEB plan. Those liabilities are really going to be showing up on your full accrual. So these would be more on the full accrual, but the cost, your contributions are already flowing through the expenses that we talked about. So really what we want to show here is the funded ratio you'll see is about 59%, and that's looking at your total plan net position or the assets you have in the trust compared to the total liability that's calculated by the actuary. And it's important to note for our value, when we do our valuations, there is no actuarial smoothing. So if you get valuations from MERS, they will include some smoothing of the investment gains or losses, really to prevent significant fluctuations in your contributions by the market, whereas GASB requires that everything be reported at market value. So therefore you will see those significant fluctuations. The other thing important to note about this graph is this is based on MERS year end. That's when the reports are done. So this is as of 12/31/23, as MERS 24 report doesn't come out till after the audit's completed. So in 2023, there was the net pension liability decreased by about 6.2 million. So part of that was increasing in your assets. There was a $5.1 million gain, as well as this 2023 was when you had the $4.5 million contribution for that pension grant. So those both increased your assets, while the liability just increased about 2.8 million just from calculations by the actuary. So that did raise your funding percentage to 59%. You will see that your actuarial determined contribution has been increasing from 1.6 million to 3.5 million. This is calculated by the actuary determining looking at the forward cost of the liability. And it's important to note that the commission has been making excess payments on that. You'll see we include that in the graph. So about $500,000 in excess of the required, just to kind of help combat that liability. And as you get more in the trust, in a typical standard market, you'll continue to increase. I know in the past, couple of months, it might not seem like it, but overall, the more you have in, the more that's going to be earning money and earning interest to help reduce that liability.
So question, Commissioner Yamas?
So as we, I noticed this change as the excess contribution, no, not that one, the actuary determined contribution continues to go up, then how we fund goes up and down based on that or on which one of these numbers? So we
Yeah,
could, like,
so the actuarial determined contribution, that's the minimum amount you are required by the state to make. So that will determine the minimum amount you will contribute. Then if you determine to do excess above that, you will add more on top of that.
okay.
So there's a little bit more detail on page 37 and 38 on
Okay.
the pension.
Yeah.
So that might give you, again, as Phil said, on page 38, the actuary says, here's the amount you must put. And that's where the state says, this is what you need to put into the plan. You
Okay.
are adding to that and putting
Right.
more than the
Every year.
requirement, trying to improve this funding. And again, you were also eligible for that grant, so that helped with the funding percentage that you have. But this is where these are outside of your control. The actuarial assumptions are driven by the interest rates. They're driven by mortality. They're driven by experience. So that number can continue to increase and the assets are impacted by the market. All you can do is put funding in. That's the number that you control.
Okay, so that was my question is that, because we can always be chasing and not quite be at 100%, right? Because those numbers change.
Yeah, I mean, they changed January 1st. I mean, this is as of December 31,
Right.
23. They're currently working on 24. And yes, I mean, for it to ever match to where you hit 100, I think it's really hard for entities to ever hit that because it's a point in a time valuation.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
I do have a question, just trying to, again, keep up. The state requires a 60% funding minimum, right? So will that be reflected in the 2024 column to come? Because I don't remember when you took that check to the bank, Dan, with the big grin on your face, right?
Dane Ackerman, Director of Finance. So when we report, that's PA 202, when we report our funding levels to the state of Michigan, we will probably be using the 2023 numbers again, because that's what's available to us. So we'll probably still be below that 60%. It'll be close. Because I think we do slightly different calculations than what you're seeing there. 2024, it's kind of anybody's guess, only maybe the actuaries know. I think investment wise, it was pretty good in 2024. So hopefully we'll be at or near that 60%. But again, we won't really know until they crunch all their numbers. And that's in the summertime, we'll we'll get that report from MERS.
So you're thinking we have to apply for a waiver yet again?
Probably at least for this year, again, because we're using 2023 numbers. And we'll see, but obviously the markets aren't doing great now, and if that continues, you know, if we're
Right.
hovering right around 60%, maybe one year we report, maybe another year we don't, I don't know. We'll just have to see what happens with all the numbers.
So,
And the state does require, as you said, under PO 202, they require a little bit of different assumptions
Right.
than the GASB. So just to
Okay.
make it more confusing,
Right.
thank you.
yes, let's have different
Thanks,
method,
Jean.
yeah, different methodology. So again, GASB would say use an appropriate discount rate. The state has kind of set a rate.
Right.
Again, the rates are gonna fluctuate. We have to evaluate that of like, we're looking at long-term. We're not looking at today. The actuary's not looking at today, what interest rate could you get? You're looking at what can you get on this plan for a 20-year period. Obviously, it's gonna fluctuate, but over that period of time, in general, rates have gone down. It used to be 8%, used to be the standard rate you could expect on a pension. Now you're talking 6.75. You're seeing lower rates. I don't recall what it is for 24, but, so again, this is going to fluctuate. The mortality tables didn't get updated a little bit because of COVID. Now they're starting to update them again, so that can also have impacts. And for the OPEB plan, what are the healthcare trend costs? Are they going down? Are they going up? So there's just many factors. I call it the actuarial voodoo, like they put everything in their model and it spits out information. We evaluate it, but we can't recalculate it. We do rely on them as specialists of understanding the trends and what's appropriate out there. But again, this is a snapshot at a point in time. I think that you continue to move towards the 60%, that you're continuing to put
Mhm,
more into the plan. That is really what the state's looking for. Are you making an effort to try and do something?
So it doesn't look like our 4.5 million is in the excess contribution column for 2024.
If you go to page 37, there's a line about midway and it's called contribution from non-employer contributing entities. It wasn't an actuarial determined
But
contribution.
where's that line?
Oh,
I'm on
Page
page 37.
right here.
Oh, here?
Yep, 4.478. So that was from a non-employer contribution. So that's really considered not part of that actuarial determined contribution. That's what the actuary told you needed to put in the plan.
Right, there was a lot of guidance we received as far as how to account for it. So
Okay.
really the money is kind of coming from the state. And this column that you're seeing for excess contributions is by the road commission directly. So that's why that doesn't show up there.
So that 4.5 doesn't show anywhere on this particular.
On
on-
page 37,
on
it's showing
that.
as
Not on her.
correct, not
right,
on that
right.
slide.
It'll
Right.
be in the net position amount. Your plan net is that blue bar, but not
Yes.
specifically called out.
Mhm.
Oh. So it's in the blue bar for 23?
Correct.
It impacts the net pension and the plan net position. So it impacts the red and the blue,
Okay,
but it's not a contribution that you were required to make.
right, right,
It just helped your plan.
okay.
Or-
Commissioner Smers.
Just for clarification, so everything that is listed here on the left-hand side is what we are required to make. And then this on page 37 has everything involved.
Page 37 shows everything that impacted the liability. So you got service costs, interest costs, benefit payments, change in assumptions, then the
Yep.
plan position got impacted by contributions, net income, these special grants, benefit payments. So that's showing everything that the actuary provided. And then page 38, this is just meant to be a snapshot of,
Okay,
again, here were the contributions the actuary said you must pay, which means the state said you must pay, and did you?
okay,
And you actually paid that and beyond.
no, thank you. Okay, that's-
You couldn't use the state grant as meeting your obligation. That was meant to be kind of a
Right, that's just
one-time
a
help.
icing on
It's
the
not
cake.
meant to replace.
Yeah. No, thank you, I appreciate the clarity.
Does that make sense?
A little bit. I'm not gonna hold up the train. Go ahead.
I mean, certainly we were glad that the state of Michigan
Right.
had this grant money. Obviously, we were determined to get as much as possible for
Right.
Washtenaw Road Commission. But then, you know, there were, I don't want to say hoops, but again, like how we had to account for it, like we had to show it as a revenue and as an expenditure and, you know, how all that was treated. We were willing to go through that process in order to, you know, be able to apply that. And ultimately, it does get applied towards our pension balances, so. I mean, that's the bottom line with this is it does count towards the assets we have to cover our pension payments.
Another way I look at it is if you had like your mortgage and you pay your monthly payment and then you get like, you hit the lottery and you're like, oh, I'm gonna throw 10 grand on my mortgage. It's kind of that extra payment. It wasn't the required payment.
Right.
You just happen to have it and you put it on there. So that's how I kind of consider these state funds of, again, that one-time help for the plan to improve funding.
Okay, I'm just trying to, in my head,
Yep.
where's that 4.5? And I don't see it, so that's why I asked.
Yep, and we can add a line next year if it would be helpful, but again, we don't anticipate that you're going to get it again.
Right.
And you've
right.
never gotten it before, so
Right.
it really is that one-time item. The actuary, again, you need to continue to make your payments as they require. So this is just over and above that.
I
Maybe
just
it-
thought we had hit our 60%.
Yeah, no, I did too, but, and again,
Uh,
the reporting mechanism for PA 202s is a little different, so maybe
Okay.
instead of 59, it'll be 60, it could be 58, I don't know until I receive all the numbers and start reporting,
Wow.
so,
Again, the volatility of the market is a huge factor.
yes.
So depending on interest rates, all those assumptions are returns on investment, you're gonna dip down below 60. Would be my guess for this
Probably
year.
right.
So that's the reality. That 4 million definitely helped. But if you look at it in the grand scheme of things, we invest almost 3.5 million into the pension each year. So we got an extra year worth of payment essentially.
Yeah.
And that's not a lot in the grand scheme of the ultimate liability. So it made a difference. It helped, but it's not gonna get us over the hump. What's gonna get us over the hump are the changes we made in 2012. Keep in mind, we
Yeah.
made significant changes in 2012,
120.
and over the course of time, the actuarial reports will definitely improve, but it's gonna take 10+ years. And we're gonna be well positioned 10 years from now.
So I'm wondering, maybe on this graph, if we put a little asterisk by excess contributions for 2023, and then at the
Mhm.
bottom, say, this
Excludes.
excludes
Yep.
the contribution from the state grant or something. Maybe that would make it a little more clear for everybody.
Yeah, I just, if I were an employee looking at this, I'd want to know
Yeah,
why isn't, yeah,
for sure.
okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
We'll go into our last graph. So now that we've talked about pension, we'll talk about OPEB. So this is a similar graph. You'll see that in honesty, a lot of our clients, since pension or OPEB wasn't required to be measured till 2006, a lot of our clients, you're going to see that their OPEB's a lot lower than their pension. And for the road commission, actually, it's the opposite. Your OPEB is at 84% funded. And there is a different measurement date. So this is, since this doesn't rely on MERS, this is through the commission. This is as of 12/31/24. And recent changes to the plan, the fact that it's closed to new hires and just adding those investments have helped with the funding and reduce the liability. And as you do excess contributions, you are earning gains on those. So you will see the market value of the assets is about 22.2 million. What the red in this case is not the total liability. This is just what's left. So this is the unfunded portion, which is about 4.2 million. Your total liability is 26.5, but as I mentioned, that's 84% funded, which is well above the state's recommendation requirement of 40%. And if you were to add both liabilities together, that's about $40 million if you look at pension and OPEB. But as we've been kind of discussing, there has been work to address those excess contributions. And really for OPEB, you have more control over the assumptions than you would with pension, as pension is with MERS. And so MERS kind of uses their studies and really determines those rates and those assumptions. So as those are changing, you'll see those in your valuation. So the assumed rate of return for your OPEB plan is 7%. Pension is 7.25%, but I will say that MERS is slowly reducing that down to an ultimate 7, but instead of going in one full year, having significant change, they are slowly reducing that down. So you'll see probably assumption changes every year a little bit until they get to that ultimate 7%, which is more of what we're seeing for a lot of these public plans, and really that's the investment rate of return that they're seeing. In terms of your OPEB plan, it has 173 participants, 43 are active, and 130 of those are retired.
And again, if the assumptions on the rate of return are going down, it doesn't help us in our funding ratio in projecting long-term. So if they're being more conservative by saying, all right, our funding or our return on investment is going to be going down by percentages, it doesn't sound like a lot, but over the long term, it can be a lot. So that 60%, again, we'll be struggling with that as they crank down on the pension. On the OPEB, again, this is a very good thing where we're funded 84%. But keep in mind, those hired after 2012 do not have healthcare as a retirement benefit. That's why we're well positioned in this case. So we're really talking about those employees that were hired prior to 2012. What are our liabilities for providing healthcare insurance? So we're well positioned. It's a closed group, as you mentioned. That overall, we're going to be in a real good spot in a much shorter period of time as it relates to the pension.
And one item on that, if you want to look at the financials, page 26 is what's called the sensitivity analysis, and we have to do that for the pension and the OPEB. The OPEB is on page 26. Looking at the current discount rate, your obligation's 4.2. If that dropped to 6, it'd be 7.3. So it just shows how a 1 percentage point has a significant impact on this. If you look at the pension, which is on page 31, your current obligation is 35.6 million. If that dropped 1 full percentage point, it'd be 46.4. If it went up 1 percentage, it'd be 26 million. So that discount rate has a significant impact on the plans. And again, it's meant to be a rate over a 20-year period. And with the fluctuations, as Phil said, MERS is looking at decreasing that, but it can vary by plan too. It's really what your portfolio is. And some of that switch has been a lot of pension plans are in more alternatives and real estate, and they're kind of looking at, do we want to stay in some of these? And they may be moving it around to more secure investments, which can impact your long-term rate of return. Because I also work on large pension plans. They really can fluctuate based on the investment decisions that they're making and what risk tolerance they're willing to accept. And again, it's going to fluctuate, you know.
So you're saying the goal is to get this discount rate down to 7%? It was 7.25 in 23, it's down to
Yeah.
7.18
They're dropping it
now.
because they're finding that long-term rates are expected to decline in
Okay.
the overall industry. And that's what we're seeing in most plans. But again, each plan could have a little different investment strategy. So you could see
Yep.
6.75 at one and 7 at another. We do have to test to make sure those are appropriate. And
Mhm.
it's really driven by the portfolio of their assets. If you're just sitting in cash, you'd be looking at, you know, 0. Very small percentages. So it really is going to be driven by the portfolio of the investments. And for the OPEB, you're required to disclose the rate of return. So on page 36, the actuary again is going to use a discount rate, but what actually happened is on page 36 for the OPEB plan. So you can see it was like -3, +13. It's kind of jumped over.
Yeah.
And those will impact the actual experience of the plan, but they're not going to change the rate every year for those fluctuations.
So in 23, it was 11.16, and in 24, it was 7.92.
Yep. So again,
Big
a
drop.
few years above what their estimate was, which
Yeah.
again, works out on average still.
Okay. And state minimum is 40%, right? 40%
OPEB.
funded,
Yep.
right? And we were at 0 in 2006, so we've come a long way. I would ask you on the page 6, you told us that the defined benefit pension plan was based on MERS of 12/31/23.
Yes.
That date then at the top, years ended, be 2023 instead of 2024?
Well, it's recorded as of 24. So when your 24 financial statements the previous year is used and the GASB allows that. Because again, as Phil said, MERS is currently being audited. Their numbers aren't gonna be final, so they can't give Dan a number in March. I mean, your audit was done in March. They hadn't even started their audit yet, so that
Okay.
information was available.
Okay. Anybody else? You're being a good sport about us.
Oh, no, I love the question. And I mean, that's it for our graph. So if there's anything else on the financials,
Hang on, let us look back
Oh,
through
yeah.
this book to see if we had anything flagged.
So again, this is meant to be a workshop, and I know Dan loves numbers, so he likes to answer as many questions as possible. Again, there's a lot of information in a governmental financial statement, as we kind of talked about, like pages 8 and 9, or like if you were to try and look like how GM would account for things, that's more of that perspective, and then the road fund is more like a budget. Again, two different perspectives. One's more long-term and one's current resources. How are you using them? What do you have left available to spend? And then again, on the entity-wide, which is on that page 8, is going to include your debt, going to include the pension, the OPEB, and those type items.
I do have a question on page 1 of the booklet. Up in opinions, the second line calls the road commission a component unit of Washtenaw County. Should I be uncomfortable with that, given our mission to be considered autonomous from the county?
So these are governmental requirements. If you are reported within the county, you are, and they've evaluated that you're a component unit, that has to be reflected as such. So
Is that accurate, Dan?
Yeah, that's correct. We've always been a component unit of Washtenaw County. Our numbers are included in their comprehensive annual CAFR. CAFR, whatever CAFR stands for, their
Right.
financial reports.
Okay,
And, you know,
I just
there's
get
been,
nervous. about
yes,
it.
there's been several meetings I've mentioned that, you know, or some of my staff reports allude to the fact that I provide information to Washtenaw County, and we have to get a draft of our financials to them by March 1st. And a lot of that is because we are a component unit, so
Okay.
we work cooperatively with them, have a great working relationship. As I mentioned, we're one of the first to be audited in the entire state, so very aggressive timelines, but we've met all of our deadlines with the county. And, you know, we are a component unit. I'm not concerned about how that's titled, I guess.
Okay, you're not concerned, then I won't be. Other questions in the booklet at all, folks?
I did want to acknowledge, you know, in order to meet the aggressive timeline, to get everything ready for the audit and to have a clean opinion every year, really appreciative of my staff. So Tracy Balkwell handles our payroll, does an outstanding job. And Jamie Kraus handles accounts payable, accounts receivable. They may be attending remotely, I'm not sure. But I just want to acknowledge all their hard work and efforts, and, you know, it's a team effort, and, you know, they continue to do a fantastic job. So I just want to make sure that they are recognized.
Hang on. Anybody? On page 17, there are all these new GASB requirements.
yes,
Is that? It feels like every year you've got 2 and 3 additional requirements. Are these set federally or at the state level?
they are set by GASB. So GASB,
Neither of those.
correct. So GASB is trying to probably keep up with FASB. So FASB would be who does the accounting standards for for-profits and not-for-profits, and then GASBs are the governmental. Sometimes there could be just one, like last year was compensated absences. I forgot to mention it, but you did implement that. It had no impact on you. It was just a change for how sick leave is recorded for some, but since you have annual leave, it had no impact. Statement 102, which is the certain risk disclosures, that isn't expected to be a common application, other than with some of the changes going on with federal policies. If someone did have a grant that's been terminated, that could be what would fall under GASB 102 as a disclosure of how it would impact the financial statements.
Hmm.
103 is going to have a larger impact. When I was younger, GASB 34 came out, which is that entity-wide reporting. They're reevaluating that model. It must be because I'm old. It's been around long enough. They got to reevaluate and, and go through. So that may have some changes of how the fund level is reported and some other items. So it's just varying. They definitely have a few projects. I think they kind of slowed down during COVID, and now they're speeding back up with some of their projects that they want to evaluate. And a lot of it is what's available out there and some of the mechanisms that they're finding governments are getting into, more partnerships and, you know, just different transactions that you didn't have when the original GASBs were written.
Dan, did you have something?
No, just, you know, Jean mentioned GASB 34. So GASB 34 was around early in my career. I've been here 30 years and what are we on, 103?
Yes.
So you can see in 30 years, went from 34 to over 100.
Yeah.
So you're right, there tends to be more and more of those and
Yeah.
there's nothing we can do. I guess we could ignore it, but I think you guys wouldn't want that to happen, right?
Well, that's where that clean opinion, you can always ignore it. I just have to then potentially
Call it
determine the
back.
impact. And again, as a firm, we respond to the GASBs. We have people involved in committees and things, just because again, they do try and get a perspective from local units. The special authorities, they, you know, they have more local units than special authorities. You'd be a special authority. You know, your accounting is just road commission, not everything. So sometimes they'll issue ones that are more applicable to them than may be applicable to you. But it is just a changing world and the obligations and the rules out there are much more challenging. So they're trying to stay current on that.
Commissioner Green?
So the GASB requirements have the effect of law, and if they're not compliant with what happens?
I wouldn't say they're law, so let's say Dan says, I'm booking everything on cash. Gene, you do what you gotta do. I'm booking cash. I would have to go through and say, I can't give you a clean opinion because GASB tells me I have to make sure that all the accounting standards are followed and the numbers are materially correct. A cash basis would not get you to that point, because a cash basis would disregard the debt, it would disregard the pension, it would disregard the OPEB. So that's where it would impact the auditor's opinion. Can I give a clean opinion on this financial statement if you're not following what GASB says? Because they're the rules of accounting. The state can set law where they say if you don't make your pension contributions, there can be ramifications, but GASB is just the authoritative accounting body. And just for information, the FASB doesn't even use numbers anymore. They've issued so many. They now have what's called codification because they just stopped.
On page 28. You've got the number of employees covered. And this may be a reflection of 1/1/2012. I don't know, you can tell me. But we've got 142 inactive plan members, beneficiaries receiving benefits, 142, but in OPEB, it's only 130. So is that because of 1/1/2012 that those numbers are different by
Correct.
12
This-
people?
So this is saying how many retirees and beneficiaries are on our pension rolls, but our OPEB health insurance, that ended at the 1/1/12. So, right, so I would expect there would be less.
And then,
And the dates are different. So the pension is as 23. The OPEB's actually as of 22, even though it's rolled forward to 24. I won't go, it just, they're allowed to have the actuarial report be 2 years old with the members and roll it forward if there's no significant
Okay.
adjustments, so.
okay,
Phil gets to deal with this stuff all during the audit, so you can,
okay.
and Dan, it's just exciting stuff.
All right, let me see if I have anything else. Do we make additional OPEB contributions? We do
Yes.
there as well.
That's on what, page 35?
Because I know when we talk about the pension, that's listed on page 38, right? Contribution excess is our 500,000. That's
Yes.
listed there. Where is that listed on the OPEB?
Page 35.
35.
So this looks to me like we did an excess contribution of $1.2 million. That's over and above what we were required to do. Do you see where I'm going with this? Where's the extra and how much is it every year? Is it another 500,000 there, Dan?
We actually we have a trust established that basically houses all the assets for our health insurance. And
Okay,
that's with MERS. We have typically made an extra payment of $500,000. I think you guys look at actual payments to retirees and there's some other calculations they go through, but the road commission actually, past practice has sent a check about $500,000 into our trust that goes towards our OPEB.
so where is that? Where do I see that in OPEB as
Page
in,
34 would be all the activity that impacted the OPEB liability.
so where's the 500,000, Jean?
So the contributions are, you're gonna get credit for cash that you put in and premiums that you pay. So they're together. So as you're making premiums, those count as contributions to the plan. And then if you put in excess cash, that contributions employer line is where that amount is showing up. The 2280.
The 500,000 won't be shown separately
Why not?
because it's,
Can it be?
it's a summary of how
Well,
much you put into OPEB.
again, the GASB says that if you pay contributions for the retirees, that counts as a contribution. So under the accounting standards, they both count the same. They're just one's in cash to the trust and one is in payments to the insurance carrier.
I mean, if you need a statement from Dan of what statements or how many payments and what payments went in to this fund, we can certainly provide that to the board. But this report is a summary of the year.
And I think it's in a GASB format, so.
So live with it.
I hate to say.
I'm
live with
pressing
it,
you, Dan.
but
Should I-
like-
I'll answer yes.
Like Matt said, we could provide some other statements,
Yeah.
or when we submit that 500,000 for our OPEB, which we'll be talking about with Q1. Certainly we could provide some documentation to the board if if you'd like to see something on that.
I would just like it to mirror what's on page 38.
Madam Chair.
I'm sorry, Commissioner Green,
So is.
what
the
page are
500
you on? Do you have a
sorry, Page
question?
34,
Okay,
is the 500,000 within the 2280?
yes. And the difference between OPEB and pension is in pension, you don't pay any premiums. You basically put money in the plan. With an OPEB, you pay insurance premiums or you pay cash, and they both count. That's the difference. So it's kind of a GASB thing of that pension just doesn't have, you can't make you're not making a payment directly to someone. It's coming out of the plan to them. So.
Yeah, MERS makes the payments, we make the payments to MERS, whereas with healthcare, we pay the premiums as an organization for the employees, is what.
Right.
You're getting at,
And GASB wants you to count that.
the way it's reported for the financial statements. But if there's a report that we can provide, we can certainly do that.
I'm wondering again with Plant Moran's slides, the PowerPoint presentation, if we put an asterisk by excess contributions to say that the road commission contributed 500,000 directly to
Yeah.
the trust.
Yep.
Maybe,
So of the
yeah,
1.2.
maybe we could add an asterisk
Yep.
there and then at least it's documented somewhere in this presentation.
Right, it's on page 38, it clearly demonstrates our extra effort to make good on these obligations. And it doesn't show the same way on page 34 is what I'm getting at.
And that's.
Well, you're paying extra, but you're paying them in premiums. you're getting credit for paying the premiums. The premiums are gonna be expensed. The trust could pay those out directly.
Is it concern from the board or showing the employees? Because if it's in, you're seeing the charts, obviously, we're, from an OPEB perspective, we're in much better position than the pension. And eventually, we're gonna stop making extra payments.
Right.
Because we're gonna get to 100%, and then we can decide those payments that we made previously for OPEB, we should
Right.
really start redirecting to the pension.
Exactly, exactly. Okay, we're talking past each other and I will continue to be on Dan's pant leg if I have concerns. Thanks, Dan. Anybody else? Okay,
Getting more.
that's all right.
The
I
last
I
item
don't have a
that,
switch or I'd turn on the
I know.
fan, Gene.
the last item that we have is, again, the audit was completed in March and it was provided to the county, but there's also a report that needs to be uploaded to the state of Michigan. We do not do that until the board approves these financials. So if you do approve them today, we can go back and have our processing upload them
Okay, before you go to Disney.
before I. I'll probably do it while I'm on the Guardians of the Galaxy. I'll try not.
No.
Yes, that's on the agenda for consent.
So Dan can just let us
Afternoon.
know.
Right,
Yep.
Yep, and then let Phil know when he
Yep.
can.
you should know.
No,
by
great
2 o'clock.
discussion. Thank you.
Okay.
Anybody
Anything
else? Thanks for indulging all the questions, all of you. Thank
Thank
you.
Actually appreciate that you're asking questions. The worst board meeting is when no one asks a question. Because again, as you know, you're responsible for the financial,
Right.
position of the,
Yep.
the road commission. So I think it's great that you're actively involved.
Well, then my Sunday was not wasted. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Good to see you, Phil. Sorry, Tiffany. All right. Are we interested in taking a break, which is what our agenda calls for at this point? Take a break, real quick one? So my one clock says it's almost 10 o'clock. So can we be back in 10 minutes? Does that work?
Yep.
Okay. We are in recess until 10:10. Welcome back, everybody. We've taken our 10-minute break and we will continue with the working session agenda going into the 2025 first quarter budget review. Mr. McDonough, take it away.
Thank you, Chair. We're going to talk about the first quarter, and as we've closed our discussion on year end for 2024, the good news is we are very well positioned to make some adjustments, and Dan's going to walk us through the first quarter budget adjustments and where we're at.
Hello again, board. Dan Ackerman, Director of
Welcome, Dan.
Finance. Yeah, I guess so. Fortunately, only comes once a year, right? No.
Oh, no, 4 times a year.
So I do appreciate the discussion this morning on 2024. Lots of great questions and keep them coming. There's no bad question except the question you don't ask, right? Or whatever that saying is. So it's good to have that dialogue and if we can't answer a question, then we'll get back with you.
Yeah.
So Moran, we certainly the numbers came in better. The actual numbers in 2024 than our budget. Some of it's by design, some of it involves carryover. Say we thought a grader would be received in 2024, we didn't get it till 2025. So that would be a carryover. So there's some of that's in the mix as well. But we'll just get right into it.
Before you get into it, Tiffany, the monitor in front of us is different than the monitor behind us. Thank you.
What's your point? Which one do you like better, Dan? Matt?
I don't want to be confused before he starts.
Yeah.
There we go.
So then why is that one different? You opened the,
This is the view.
okay.
Too many views.
A lot of options here.
Yeah, that's right. That's
Options.
right.
Listen with me today. Okay.
So let's talk revenue. Okay, Michigan Transportation Funds, certainly I report every month on that. And as I've been reporting, we've received 2 months of, Michigan Transportation Funds, so January and February. And they are trending positive when looking at the previous year. I also shared with you, the state of Michigan has changed their, estimates and have decreased those. So again, for 2 months, things are looking good, but as you know, it fluctuates greatly. So we focus on those projections from the state of Michigan. Again, they've been decreased, and so we are recommending that we lower our budget for Michigan Transportation Funds for 2025. Now, certainly, we will reevaluate in the second quarter, and we continue to watch that. But as the numbers are right now, it makes sense for us to decrease that budget line item by about 485,000 to 37 million. Any questions on that? It's a little confusing that it's trending positively, but again, we have to look at all 12 months.
So you recommend that we lower it to 485, 485,000?
Reduce it by 485 to 37, yes.
Okay,
The initial budget was 37,485.
okay.
If we could turn to page 4 in the budget. So the budget itself. Document.
Yeah,
In page 4, you'll see that at the top, Michigan Transportation Fund revenues, it was 37,485,000.
Yeah.
The revision we're recommending is to go down by 485, so that the yearly revenue projected budgeted amount would be 37 million.
okay.
So even though the first 2 months have been positive, MDOT published new recommendations, which over the course of the year were lower than what we initially had thought back in December and November when we were developing the 25 budget for this year.
So does this have to do, may or may not, I guess, with the trend of the market?
I'm guessing, and CRA has a wonderful consumption in the state of Michigan, and you can see consumption of fuel is going down.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking a lot of it is related to that.
Yeah, this one's more of a user
Okay.
revenue, so it's
Yeah.
not related to the market.
Right.
So it's more so how much are you paying at the pump, and also how many vehicles are getting registered.
Okay,
So MTF is those two components.
Commissioner Green?
Yes, so this is an anticipated reduction in revenue,
Mhm.
but you said we're trending positively.
Right, that's just 2 months of data. Next month, it could be down by double digits. If you look at the Michigan Transportation Funds from month to month, there's wild swings. So we look at it from a 12-month perspective with what the state provides us for estimates and we adjust accordingly. And then at this point in time, we're gonna use those state estimates. When we get more data from, again, second quarter, we'll have 4 or 5 months at least. Maybe we can adjust it the other way, but just given all the knowns that we have right now, we just think it's appropriate to make that adjustment to decrease a little bit.
We're cautious.
Yes, yeah, we're conservative.
Absolutely.
Which, I would certainly recommend, if Michigan Transportation Fund were to double, I mean, that's a good problem to have, right? Like, what roads are we gonna improve? What equipment are we going to buy? But if it were to be halved, then you'd have another problem, so. And I know there's been a lot of discussion in Lansing about other funding and so on. To me, I guess that's kind of just talk right now. Until we actually see something concrete, then obviously we would certainly welcome that and make some adjustments. But I don't like to make changes based on what comes out of the governor's office or what the legislature is talking about. But hopefully they can come up with something.
And just for the record, that 37 million is still higher than last year. So that is a projected revenue is higher than what we received for last year's MTF. So it is good news. We're getting more than we did last year, but we are being conservative in our approach. We're reducing the amount more, just based on that report by MDOT on the projections.
Any other questions on that? I know it's obviously very, 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 very important to us. And that's why we watch it closely and, we'll continue to share information with the board on it. Township revenues, we had some increases and decreases. Huron River or Huron Road at Brinker, there was a signal project. And I want to say some of this was was expected in 2024. And instead, we got the revenues in 2025. So we want to make an adjustment for that. And there's some project deferrals. I believe we're calling this the year of the culvert, correct?
Yes.
So it is the year of the culvert, but there's only so much capacity we have in talking to Brent, getting permits and things. So some of the culvert projects, and we're still doing a lot, as you'll see. And so a lot of this presentation is going to reference the appendixes with the primary and local road project listings. And just to remind the board that anything that's highlighted has been changed. So there's a lot of things that are highlighted, and that was all of our discussions we had as staff, and definitely appreciative of engineering and operations. They spent a lot of time updating the numbers and just making sure that everything was up to date and so on. So, but again, so a lot of, when I talk about projects, a lot of it, you'll be able to find the support for that in those appendices.
And some of the
Questions?
culvert, I'll just add to the culvert discussion with the townships. The townships were awarded a grant to the Water Resource Commissioner's office. They're still working through and putting agreements in place between the Water Resource Office and the Road Commission. And then on top of that, we're also dealing with new township boards. So we're having to educate them. So we have had some minor adjustments in some of our culverts. And one project in particular, the example I give is Joy Road for Salem Township. It was going to be a joint Salem and Superior. That one's going to get deferred and reallocated to two different culverts in Salem Township. So that's an example where that was a substantial investment, and that was more than what they could afford. So it was going to be a partnership between two townships. We're going to defer that. At some point, we're going to have to address that culvert, but right now, engineering is doing a great job of working with our townships to get those agreements in place, get the permitting necessary, and we will get them done. The requirement is to get it done by 2026. So the vast majority of them will get hopefully done this year, and we'll have some to still accomplish in 26.
Dan, is this stormwater grant program a discretionary grant?
That's a good question.
It was, the way that I understand it, it was money that was assigned to the Water Resource Commissioner's office from the county. Initially it was ARPA, but I'm not certain if it was converted funds or whatnot, but it is not that there's not a risk there as far as a grant that's going to be taken back as a discretionary, is my understanding.
Okay, I just want to go on the record. Brad Wyfrich, new MDOT director, said at the highway conference that discretionary grants are on hold without signed agreements and obligation.
So my understanding is all these are obligated because we've identified these culverts, and the county has identified the stormwater program. So we are not at risk.
Brad would dispute that with you because he said you need both. You have to have a signed agreement and obligation. So I would just urge that we watch that as we're working towards signed agreements.
Sure.
That, sign it, get it obligated, so you have both boxes checked, or you could lose this money. Why is Superior and Salem at odds on this point of sharing the cost of those culverts? Am I misunderstanding?
It's not at odds, they just don't have the funds.
And we can't roll money forward
No.
to
it's
make that
significant.
work?
Yeah,
Okay,
well beyond our
so
matching.
who doesn't? Superior doesn't?
It was twofold. There's a poor condition culvert and bridge right adjacent one another. So if you fix the culvert, you still have the bridge as an issue.
Mhm.
So we thought it best that Salem given that Superior was not aware of the great expense, because it's a new board,
Mhm.
of what that culvert would have been. And there's the bridge issue. We recommended to Salem and the Water Resource Commission, or his office, to reallocate the Joy Road award to 2 other culverts. And ultimately, it is the township's decision. It's
Understood.
their grant. So we make the recommendation. My understanding, they've made that request, and the Water Resource Commissioner's office has approved that request. They need to sign the memorandum of understanding still, and agreements from this board will come forward between the township and the road commission.
I would just say time is of the essence. Get both those boxes checked, or
Understood.
we have no idea, because our marriage rate doesn't hurt to the top of the new director to put us at the top of the list for,
Again, those funds are separate from MDOT, but your comments are.
that's federal money, though. This
Understood.
grant is federal money.
Understood.
Okay, okay. Commissioner Green,
May I ask what a discretionary grant is?
That's a great question.
somebody
Brent's
knows.
gonna come forward.
Save us, Brent.
Yeah, Brent Shalak, Director of Engineering. So discretionary funds are like competitive grants that we would go out to separate from our other federal aid, which are non-discretionary, which are provided to us through a formula. So we get federal funds that we put within the Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP, that are allocated to us through a formula. The discretionary ones that we go out for a competitive grant.
Oh, I
So
see.
like our
Okay.
safety funds, our bridge funds in some aspects. So those competitive grants would be discretionary.
Okay, thank you.
And again, these aren't
Question.
grants that the road commission received. It's the county and the townships essentially. So we're helping to facilitate spending of that money, and we're providing the information, and it's up to them to act on it.
But this money actually was received by the county board at a time when that money could not be put towards roads, right? I know eventually the ARPA dollars were modified, but this is going through water resources.
Yes, the county distributed $2 million to the Water Resource Commissioner's office for this program.
Right.
The stormwater grants.
Yeah, and again, Brent Shalak, Director of Engineering. I would add that the risk is really low or probably non-existent for these funds to be clawed back. The county board is the ones that have where these funds were allocated, and they then recognize this in a program for a culvert replacement program. And so to me, those funds are already allocated and obligated for this program. And then we developed a process to then select where those funds would go. We worked with the Water Resource Commission on developing that program. So to me, these funds are not at risk of being in jeopardy of not being expended.
So
Commissioner Yamas,
are you saying that these are funds that have already been received for the
Correct.
county, right? So
Correct.
that's why they're not in jeopardy. Okay,
Correct.
that's what I was.
Yeah,
Yes.
they've
Okay.
identified it as an infrastructure that's gonna get built prior to 2026.
It's not grant money that we're waiting for the federal government to send.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I
There's
think that
no-
was the
Yeah,
concern.
right. There's no contract that we need to have signed with MDOT or FHWA to receive those funds. That
Okay.
They've already been received through the county board and allocated towards this type of project.
Okay.
but there is no agreement signed.
That would just be an agreement amongst the townships and the Water Resource Commission
Right.
on that memo of understanding of how those funds are going to be distributed and invoiced and then we have our separate agreement with the township on utilization of the remaining 50% of the funds. So those are the agreements that we're discussing. It's not anything with the county board or with MDOT or FHWA.
Okay. Again, my antenna quiver based on what County Administrator Dill said at the Saline Chamber when he indicated that should federal dollars disappear or get clawed back. He was counting on partners to help backfill on that. So my concern is, are these dollars protected to the point that if the county decided, oh, well, you know, we have a hole over here, so let's take that. It hasn't been, construction hasn't been started, contracts haven't been signed for that work. Let's pull it back over here to compensate for a gap.
Yeah, and I certainly understand that, and that conversation did happen, but I also heard from Administrator Dill that the ARPA funds, that they were in a good position, that they had received, all of those funds. And that's how this program initially started.
Mhm.
Again, like Matt said, I don't know if they redistribute those in some fashion amongst their own budget to then fund this program. That part I'm not aware of, but according to Water Resources, these funds are available and ready to be utilized.
Okay,
And ultimately, the township must act to enter into those agreements. We're
Right.
facilitating that, but there are boards where the Northfield, for example, Northfield Township, the board agreed to, or applied for the grant. And then a new board came on board. We're telling them you need to enter in this agreement. They said, what? And they're not moving it
Mhm.
forward. So that's out of our control.
Hmm.
Unfortunately, we're trying to educate,
Right.
meet with the township supervisors so that they know exactly what the situation is. And this is the golden opportunity. You've got to cash this golden ticket in, but it's up to them. They have to cash it in. And we're educating and doing the best we can, but until they sign that memorandum of understanding, we can't put forth an agreement, township agreement either. And because these boards are certainly coming in new, or they're getting into their budgeting process. They've got to allocate funds for these culvert projects. And so it's been a big education for our staff to work with our township partners. And we are strong advocates to get this money spent.
Commissioner McCollum?
Matt, did they have the opportunity to look at the
Let's go
town?
forward, so.
Okay, sorry. Did they have the opportunity to look at the, was it funding, road funding 101?
Yes, so that is certainly available. We have the township booklets. We walk them through the township booklets, but as you can imagine, at being a newly
Oh,
elected
yeah.
township official, roads are just one fraction of
Yeah.
what they have to
I'm
pay
sure.
attention to. So we try to garner that attention and educate them, but ultimately it's a lot.
Okay, I just thought if,
No, it's a great resource and I'm glad you brought that up. We will continue those efforts for education.
Commissioner Green?
Thank you. So if the township board sign a memorandum of understanding, those can't be revoked, right?
I am not going to speak on to what can and can't be revoked because we're not party to that. Again, we are not, we didn't receive ARPA funds.
Right.
We aren't party to what agreements are made with the county. We are not administering the stormwater grant program. Yes, there's risk in receiving these federal funds. I think the risk is low. That's my opinion. But I don't have a great answer for you on that.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, any other questions?
Where are we, Dan?
Where are we? I don't know.
Culverts.
Okay, we'll go right into federal aid since we.
Going back, just one, and I don't know if we mentioned it. Could you go back one slide?
Sure.
So another decrease due to project deferral, the state road pathway. Again, we do a lot of partnerships. This is a partnership with federal funds for a transportation alternative program, often referred to as TAP. Those are competitive grants. This project is not going to happen this fiscal year. It's going to be deferred to next year. So this is a Pittsfield Township project we're working with them on. It's essentially a pass through because federal funds have to come to this agency. Any costs incurred in excess of the grant are the responsibility of Pittsfield Township that we bill them for. So this is the portion that we anticipated billing them for. Because the project's gonna be deferred, we aren't gonna receive that revenue, which is essentially a pass-through anyway. So just wanted to make note of that. And there's another one I'm sure we'll talk about too, is the border trail. Any questions on
Commissioner
that?
Yamas, did you have a question?
Well, I would object to all the highlights.
What
These
page are
highlights,
you looking at?
I'm looking at page 26, but when you made mention of all the highlighted information are changes that have been made
Correct.
or, okay, so I was just trying to understand the changes. So are they increases? None of them look like decreases, right?
It's a combination, you know.
So if you
some-
look
some
on page
projects-
26 at the bottom, I just
Yes.
referred to the state road pathway.
Yeah.
We changed that to construction to design as far as the status,
Okay,
because it's not gonna get built this year. And then we zeroed out the anticipated federal and contributions from others.
okay.
So that was a decrease. So that's why Dan was highlighting that in his presentation,
Right.
because it's being deferred. The same is true for Huron River Drive border trail, Delhi Metro Park and Wagner. That is not gonna get built this year. It's being deferred. It changed to the design status, and then we zeroed out the federal and contributions from others. We're still gonna expend some
Right.
consultant fees and right-of-way acquisition, so that revenues, or we call it revenue, but that expense and also revenue from others. So that's why I say it's pass-through. We expend it and then bill it, and then we count it as revenue.
Okay. Great, thank you.
And then all the other changes, certainly we can walk you through any of them that you have questions on, but we're kind of just doing the bigger numbers, so to speak.
Right.
And this is a great spreadsheet that Brent
is.
and engineering has developed. And I had asked in all those cells of the changes that there's some math there, so we know, was it an increase or a decrease? That really helps me out. So, you know, there's a lot, but like I said, it's increase, decrease, add. There's a lot of things going on there, but I can go into those cells and see, did we add 500,000? What did we do with this project? So,
No, now that you've explained it, thank you very much. I appreciate the spreadsheets.
yes,
So the grand total is actually what I'm interested in.
yes, sure, yep.
So
Thank you.
Dan, let me ask you this process-wise.
Hmm?
When do you want to dive into the appendices? Do you want to continue with your overview and then dip into those later, or as we go?
As we go is
Okay.
fine, yeah.
Okay,
Because probably that relates to some of the things that I'll be talking about, but, you know, as questions come up, feel free to ask. So we were already talking about federal aid a little bit. So again, there were some add and additions and subtractions, but again, just pointing out some of the major changes here. Matt already talked about the state road pathway project. The previous slide was the impact with the township revenues. This is a decrease with the federal aid itself. And then the other significant change is our border to border trail segment D4. That's being pushed to, is it next year, Brent, or is it, okay, construction next year? But that's a $2 million decrease with the federal aid.
And that project is significant. It's not a $2 million project. It's more like a $5 million project. 2 million of that is federal. So that's why, when we start looking at the large ones that are impactful to our overall budget, that's why we're trying to highlight these.
And then if you're looking at our primary road spreadsheet at the end, you should be able to see that there's a decrease there to be highlighted.
so Dan, I have questions about Appendix I, which is on pages 24 through 26.
Okay.
Sure.
And when I look at the federal state grants column, there are in our budget, we've got several that are federal dollars and identified, and I'm talking about Brent's spreadsheet that you gave us last time. And I've identified which ones were in Brent's spreadsheet, but there are some that were not, that I'm wondering about. So on page 24, I'm just going down the numbers column. The 240 was in your spreadsheet, Brent. The 158 was in your spreadsheet. The 761 was not.
So that's Dexter, Chelsea in Lima Township between Freer and Dancer, Brent.
Oh, yeah, we had to modify some of those tip numbers because the limits of that project changed. So, and I don't know how to describe this without getting into the weeds. There's a portion of Dexter Chelsea that, because the funds that we were using for that project are rural funds. There's a portion of Dexter Chelsea between Freer and 2,000 feet, 3,000 feet east of Freer. It's actually an urban boundary.
Okay.
So we had to modify our limits, which then modify those federal funds.
So where is that 761 in your spreadsheet? That's the project Dexter Chelsea Road.
Yeah, this project's been obligated, so those funds are secure. We've also entered into an agreement with MDOT already, and we have a contractor, so it's been bid. So it may have been, is it in the spreadsheet?
It
that
should be in
you're
the
referring to?
spreadsheet in the appendix where under federal state grant, the contracted construction is 761.
Right.
Yeah, but what Commissioner Fuller is
I'm looking for it
expressing,
in your spreadsheet.
you had provided an updated spreadsheet to all federally,
Mhm.
and there may be a,
I'm not nitpicking or
I know, yeah,
criticizing you,
yeah.
Brent. I'm concerned about the federal dollars.
right, so this
And
project
Yeah.
specifically, we can affirm, it's been
Yeah,
obligated,
it's all been
been
obligated.
bid, and we have an MDOT agreement. We can modify that spreadsheet, but that one is definitely gonna happen,
Okay.
and there's zero risk, because it has been obligated.
Yeah, and that may be a typo where it's 791 here and 761 there, but those are all been, like Matt said, those have all been obligated. Those funds, we've received
That project.
for that project, correct?
Yeah.
So that's why they're not in your spreadsheet? Because when I tallied up the ones that are in your spreadsheet versus the ones that I see in your spreadsheet, but not in this appendix, it's $3.7 million.
Again, what's gonna guide and govern, and will trump is the budget before you, the one that we're discussing. Certainly, we put that together as a secondary information.
Yeah,
To
okay.
address your concern. So if there's an error, we can correct it, but the budget is the primary one, the one that we're talking through. And it's obviously recognized in the budget on page 24.
Okay.
Is there
You
another one?
understand my
Yep.
neuroses
do,
or
and-
paranoia or whatever you want to call it. I just,
Sometimes the spreadsheet that I had about federal aid, those
Yeah.
are the fiscal years that we receive those funds. And those are the years that we have to obligate those funds. It may not impact our budget until a year prior, because that's when we're gonna construct that project.
okay.
So I'd have to look through my list and see, because we did have some that carried over, that would
Right.
carry over into 26,
Right.
which then would different than what you see, but with the spreadsheet that you're talking about, we listed it based on the fiscal year of when we received those federal aid dollars.
Okay. And where you've zeroed out, like the Island Lake, countywide crack seal, and the Kavanaugh Lake items, Dan, in your appendix, then we will still be investing some of our resources, right? Engineering and so forth. So if the federal money never appears, we've got shovel-ready projects. Is that how that works?
I guess, did the status change to design?
Which one are you referring to? What page are you on in
think
the
that's
budget?
Page 24,
Yes.
whether I'm on, I mean, there are several.
Island
where
Lake
all the
Road.
Federal stuff has been zeroed out.
So the Island Lake Road between Workner and Stouffer,
Yep,
that is a new project to the budget. It has zero federal or state funds.
yep,
It is a Michigan Transportation funded project for Seal Coat.
okay. So that's why there's no federal,
Correct. If it doesn't have any,
We're gonna be bidding.
if there's no dash, there was never any federal dollars assigned to it.
okay,
So this is a new new project to the budget. That's why it's completely highlighted. And that will be covered in Dane's presentation where we're adding things to the budget. This is one of the projects. So we added, I forget how many 100,000 for Seal Coat,
150 or something?
150-ish. I think there was about 4 miles essentially that we added. So we added them by name to the project list.
so that little dash in there means what?
So if there was a change typically, or if there was funds identified previously, you would probably see the dash because it got zeroed out.
So it means it's already been spent.
No,
No.
means there's no money allocated for,
There was, but now there isn't.
it was a change probably.
Am I with you?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, okay. All right,
No federal funds.
So there's 3 columns, the state and federal grants, that will show you what federal funds or state funds are in the project. The middle column is contributions from others. That could be federal aid buyout, that could be millage, that could be township, or one of our partners like county parks. And then WCRS expenditures means how much money do we have in it? Usually that's Michigan Transportation Funds.
Right.
Or staffing.
Jeff, did you have a question? Okay, go on. Thank you.
Yeah, you may want to just stay here.
Should we get you a chair?
Yeah.
You both have stools to sit on something rather than.
Fine.
All right, so I think we can go on to the next slide unless there's more questions on this particular one.
Did you go over?
Commissioner
the-
McCollum?
Oh, sorry. You go over the, border to border.
Yeah, Matt.
There was a decrease due to federal aid.
Yes, so
Yes.
on page 26,
I got it.
at the very bottom, very last project listed, under non-motorized projects, that's the Huron River Drive Border to Border Trail. That project is being deferred to next year, 2026. So therefore, the revenue of $2 million that was previously in the budget, it got zeroed out. And so that's why you see the dash
Okay.
in yellow under federal and state grants column. You also see a 0 from contributions from others for construction because that money will not be spent this year. We still have contributions from others to pay for the consultants and right away because we are still in that design phase.
Yep.
And County Parks is going to pay for that. And you can see we have $0 of WCR expenditures because per the agreement, all costs are borne by County Parks. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right.
Commissioner Green?
Thank you. And so the
Page number?
Gettys, I'm sorry, on page 26.
Okay.
Does, as it relates to the Gettys Road non-motorized trail, does this mean that the money has already been received and it's nothing can stop that project?
The money is not received for federal projects.
not.
It gets obligated. So
Okay.
again, MDOT pays the contractor. That's how the federal monies get distributed. So we never see it. It flows through our budget because it's an investment into our road system or right away. In this case, I believe Gettys has been obligated. That
Yes,
project,
Gettys has been obligated and actually that project has been bid out. So that was in the April bid letting. So those funds are obligated. That project's moving forward with accepting that contractor through because it's ultimately an MDOT project that we would administer.
Yeah. And anytime the board gets an MDOT agreement, that means the money's been obligated. So this board already approved the Gettys Road Pathway Agreement with MDOT.
And that's why
That
it's a carryover,
obligates it. Yep.
right?
It's a carryover because it was originally a fiscal year 24 project,
Yep.
but then got carried over to 25. So you'll see that's very similar
Yep.
for the state road pathway. So whenever we do the
Yep.
26 budget, you'll see that as a carryover into the 26 budget.
I think some of that will be our Q2 budget discussion where we also look out to 26 and 27, and Brent will work on all the projects and, you know, how that flows into the budget. So a lot of that would show up then.
Okay, so stay tuned.
Yes.
Any other questions on that?
Okay,
Oh, great questions. Thank you.
Yep.
are we done with the federal aid slide?
Yes.
Okay,
Okay, other contributions, we were a bit conservative as far as what we felt we were receiving from the county millage.
Okay.
So we want to add about another 200,000 to the revenues for that, which is great. And then as we talked about previously, decrease of 4.2 million for the border trail segment D4, that's from county parks. And again, so we would see that in 2026. Okay, expenditures. So we did have some carryover, and we want to make sure if we budgeted for equipment that we thought we would receive in 2024 and we did not, we want to make sure we carry over those funds into 2025 in order to not cut into Adam's budget for capital expenditures in 2025. So for road equipment, there's about 410,000 that we're carrying over that we want to add to this budget. And for yard and storage, that's about 245,000. And all those should be reflected, and I don't remember the appendix, but there's an appendix for equipment and facilities in the back there.
Get to that. Appendix
Appendix
L on page 31 is the equipment. And appendix M for facilities.
You just want to see a breakdown of that. There you go. So again, talking about projects. Because of the our fiscal where we ended in 2024, staff felt that some things could be added to our budget, some projects. So we added seal coat, which initially was zeroed.
We go back to the presentation, Tiffany. Thank you.
Thank you. So we initially had 0 for seal coat because given where we thought we would end in 2024 as well as our 2025 budget, we didn't feel we could justify doing any seal coat projects. But again, because things, our numbers came in better in 24, we added seal coats, about $185,000. And that also shows up in all the projects. And I believe there is something that would denote seal coat that should be highlighted. Adam and Ken have put, you know, what roads we're doing seal coat on.
Yep, that was the Island Lake that Commissioner Fuller, you had caught that was added to the budget. These are projects that we're looking to, based on our financial position at end of 24, add back into investments into the road assets. So seal coat, crack seal, and then we had some additional costs for some of our already planned projects.
And similarly with crack sealing, again, that was zeroed out because we didn't feel the budget could support it. But we are adding about $210,000 And I believe those projects also are in those appendices.
Oh, I'm sorry, Commissioner McCollum.
No, I just had a question about what is a high friction surface?
Brent,
It's
can you come up?
wonderful. That's what it is.
Oh, okay. No
It's
need to
it's
answer. I know
second
now.
only to
It's one-
rumbles and mumbles in my book.
So Brent, this project, was it added to the project? Cause it was already programmed.
It was, Brent Schlack, Director of Engineering. So this, I think this got kind of caught up in, me being off for my medical issue, but this was actually it's a 24 project that was obligated in 24. And so if you look through the history, it made it through our final budget of 24. And then in 25, there was a small amount that was carried over. That project had to get carried over because Willis Road, if you've driven down Willis Road, there are centerline rumbles along Willis Road that were part of this project. What got carried over were those high friction surface treatments along Old 12 and Werkner. Basically, that was based on the time of year that the material, it was weather dependent. And so we had to carry a portion of that project over into 25. And so that's what that project is. And so it originally got left out of the preliminary budget for 25. And then we recognized, oh, hey, we have a carryover for a portion of this project. And so that's what got added back in the first quarter.
Was your question, what is that?
Yeah,
As
and,
opposed-
did you, so the whole amount is 1.2 that got carried over?
It was, but and this is where it actually will benefit our budget in the end, but that full 1.2 will be expended in 25.
Okay,
And this, go ahead.
yeah, oh, yeah. What is the high friction? What is that?
So
exactly?
what that is, it's a treatment that they put down on the pavement that actually provides a higher friction. Well,
Nice.
yeah, thanks, Tiffany.
Thank you.
So it's, you can see they apply like chips that have a jagged edge and it's epoxied into the surface. And it provides that, so it's a higher friction mainly through the curves of roads. We have this in several areas through the county and it does actually provide a great safety benefit for those, horizontal curves.
So what does that do when you're driving on that?
It feels like a chip seal road.
Yeah.
It's a more permanent chip seal essentially.
It's less slippery.
Yeah,
Yes.
when it rains or it snows. Yeah.
Oh,
So Joanne's not familiar. She is a chauffeur.
That's true.
Yeah, it's very similar to a chip seal, but chip seal, we use a different type of rock doesn't have maybe as the jagged edge that this has. And so, yeah, it just provides that higher friction, through those curves.
And instead of placing it on an emulsion, you place it with epoxy so it stays and it's more permanent.
Right.
Much longer.
Much longer.
Yeah,
Right.
it's like a epoxy deck seal for our
Yeah,
bridges.
very, very similar to what they would do on a deck to preserve the deck. And they
yeah.
do that epoxy overlay, very similar. But it's the type of material that you're putting into that epoxy.
So less slippery, less hydroplaning.
Yes.
Probably.
Yes.
Commissioner Green.
Does it also extend the life of the road?
It does to some degree because we're sealing those cracks and sealing that surface, right? And so what really hurts our roads is water. So it keeps that water from penetrating into the road. So where this surface is at, it definitely will help improve the service life of that road.
Then is it cost effective?
The cost is very much more expensive than a chip seal, which a chip seal provides that same type of benefit for extending the service life of the road, but at a much less cost. I don't have the exact cost of but it is far more expensive because you're using that epoxy instead of the emulsion, which is a little less expensive.
Thank you.
Up, Commissioner Smers.
Over the life of chip seal versus the life of the epoxy, which lasts long.
That's, I think it depends on, so with the epoxy, you have to really have a clean surface. And so it depends on the contractor. We've had some very good success. But over time, that epoxy can delaminate and get peeled up from our trucks where, with the chip seal, it has the emulsion. So each year it's still kind of healing itself.
Right.
Where with that epoxy, it's more brittle. So I don't know that we haven't compared the two. We've had the epoxy out there just as long or longer than we've had our chip seal or we've re-chip sealed the road. So I would say it's probably comparable. But it depends on that workmanship of how they apply the material.
I'd also add that it also depends on what you're putting it on.
Right.
So the condition of the road overall, underneath is gonna be, the driving factor of how long it lasts.
It all depends on the substrate.
Right, right. So mostly this gets applied to our asphalt roadways, in the curve sections. And it is, looked highly upon when applying for safety grants.
Okay.
So if you add this to the scope of work, you score better. And so they've been very successful at getting these, safety grants by applying this appropriately in curves where you can increase friction and ultimately, hopefully keep the car on the road.
Right. Yeah, the high friction surface has a crash reduction factor. And so if you're seeing those type of crashes where people are departing the road, you can apply part of those safety grants and use that treatment to then say we'll reduce these number of crashes based on this treatment.
My understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, is that while more expensive, it adds much more safety to the public.
It
So
does,
that's worth the
and,
money.
and it's a good application through our safety grant application, looks really good, and so a lot of those are, federal funds, so we're either having an 80-20 match, 80% federal dollars, 20% RMTF, or even up to 90% federal aid and 10% local dollars.
So with the offset of funding, it might actually be possibly less.
Oh, yeah, I would definitely, it would be less expensive than using our own funds.
As
Okay.
Chairman Folder says, we could nerd out on this all the time, but I won't. go into the meeting.
Yeah, you're welcome. Any other questions?
Commissioner Yamas?
Yeah.
For you, but for Dan.
Oh, great. Thank you.
So Dan.
What page?
Page, 15 through 21, and it's a question about the line item expenditures for all of them, right? So it says year-to-date 2024 budget and year-to-date. So the 2024 number is significantly lower than the budgeted number. Are those carryover numbers from 2024 and that's not what was budgeted, right? Because those are really when we approved the budget in 23 for 24, what is that left over?
So the 2024 year-to-date column is actual cost through
Okay.
March of so January to March of
Okay,
2024. So we're trying to compare that to the 2025 year-to-date, same time frame, January through March.
I see.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're just using it as a comparison, kind of saying, all right, this is how much we spent at this point last year. And does it make sense? Is it tracking kind of with our history?
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just as a reminder to the board, we have not been able to close out March yet. This meeting is fairly soon. And so the 2025 year-to-date numbers are tentative. But when we provide the budget for approval in May, that'll have the actual numbers. So it might even trend a little bit lower right now because we may not have all the data in there right now.
Okay.
So we should compare year-to-date to year-to-date.
Correct.
Not year-to-date to budget,
Right,
right?
right.
Well, we look at both, of course. We want to look at
Right.
compared to budget to see rate of burn and those type of things. So.
Yep.
When you're looking
That's
at labor,
percentage used.
right, exactly, percentage used, exactly.
Right.
So you're kind of tracking we're a quarter of the way through the year. We should have eat up about a quarter of labor, but then we may have some vacancies. So we're looking to hire and we haven't quite filled all the vacancies. So it makes sense to me that we're under a quarter of labor budget. used. So those are the kind of thoughts that, as I review these, that I'm going through, department by department.
Thank you.
Yes,
Good thing you like numbers, Dan.
yes, I do. All right, going back to the PowerPoint, projects added, deferred. So we already kind of talked about these and we talked about revenues. The culvert replacement projects, again, so there's a decrease in revenues for that, also a decrease in expenditures. And we talked about state road and border to border that will be carryovers into next year. So we did have some projects that have changed, and these are increases. Parker Road, we're adding about 400,000 to that project, and then Bemis Road resurfacing about 200,000 to the initial budget for that.
And for Parker Road, I think what we've done is we've gone out and reviewed. I will say Mother Nature was not kind to us this winter. We saw a lot of deterioration from the freeze thaw, particularly the very cold temperatures and the frost coming out of the ground. We've seen a lot of pavement degradation. This segment of Parker Road has deteriorated to the point where we needed to do additional resurfacing more than what we expend or expected. So we're adding budget to account for that. That's the reason for that. And it is a millage project. So we want to continue to accomplish that millage project but also accomplish it with the right fix. So the right fix is going to take some additional dollars. That's why we're assigning an additional $400,000 to that. Same would be true for Bemis Road resurfacing project. We've had some additional costs and therefore we're assigning additional budget for it. There's questions we can bring.
Commissioner
right up.
Green?
So I've got a question. So with the millage, the pot's only so big.
Correct.
If there's an overrun or unexpected cost increase, who bears that? Us?
The road commission.
Okay.
So that's why we have things like the fund balance, so we can dip in and make the appropriate fix rather than doing a fix, but a fix that's not appropriate won't last very long. So we don't want to be back here 3 years from now doing pothole patching. So we're going to add money to it to do, for instance, this will have 2 lifts of asphalt in places so that it can be a longer duration and appropriate fix based on the pavement deterioration. Is that fair?
That's fair. Yeah, Brent Schlack, Director of Engineering. Yes, that's fair. Parker Road, yeah, the winter was not kind to us. We have to do a mix of fixes with a little bit more mill and resurface and then actually adding some pulverization. When we did that investigation, the pavement thickness was not the thickness that we anticipated when we planned the millage. Again, not to get into weeds on how we do our business, but when there's not a lot of material out there and we're gonna go do a mill and resurface, then you're milling up what is there. And so you want to make sure that you maintain a good base of material when you're coming back to do a mill and resurface. So that then prompted us to, we have to look at another treatment, and that's what added the cost.
So the action Brent's referring to is prior to doing the project, staff went out and they cored the pavement. They literally drill into the pavement, see what the thickness is. In spots, it was not very thick. So therefore, we decided this area needs 2 lifts of asphalt rather than 1 because there's only 2 is there. So, but it's lasted a very long time with those 2 inches, which is surprising based on Dexter High School is right there, and it sees a very good volume of traffic. So we thought appropriate, like, all right, well, then make a recommendation on what the appropriate fix would be, and we'll add the budget in first quarter. And that's what we're doing. That's our recommendation. This will be a long-term fix, particularly with a lot of busing and a lot of car traffic going to Dexter High School right there. It will be a good project But again, to Commissioner Green's point, it's more than what was planned. And how do we pay for that? That's Michigan Transportation Funds. And that's why we have a healthy fund balance. And I would like to point out on, I think this is an appropriate time, page 4 of the budget. Take a look,
What page is that?
page
Page
4.
4, he's-
This is our proposed budget balance sheet. And at the end of 2024, we had approved a budget for 2025. And the year-end fund balance was gonna be approximately $10.3 million. So we had a lot of work that we're gonna do. And we're going to essentially spend down some of our savings to 10.3. Now, given our good financial position, how 2024 actually ended, we ended on a fairly good note. We're able to add to the list of things that we're going to accomplish for 25. And yet our fund balance is projected to be, if all gets approved as recommended, $18.7 million. So our fund balance is very healthy.
Yeah.
Even with these recommendations to add things to the budget.
puts it at
That's-
20%.
Yes, yeah, we're in good shape. I know it gives me heartburn and I know it gives the board heartburn as well when we look at $10 million.
Yeah.
So
You've been waiting to say that, haven't you? About the 18?
I have. Celebrating a little bit, but we can't celebrate too much because every year and every parts of the year presents challenges.
Right.
And that's why we look at it on a quarterly basis. So this is a very important discussion. The good news is we're able to add to the budget, kind of address some of these things that are coming up and still be in a very good financial position. Sorry, I didn't mean to steal your thunder, Dan.
He can hold his excitement back anymore.
Right. So as Matt said, all these proposed adjustments and changes are already in that proposed
Yep.
summary that Matt just shared with you. So all those numbers are already in there. Okay, moving on. Okay, Barb's favorite here. So again, with our 2025 initial budget of a little over $10 million, staff felt that was definitely on the low side. So we did not include those additional payments for our OPEB and our pension. But again, because of how we came out of 2024, with these included, we're still at $18 million. So staff felt definitely it's very important to make these additional payments. As you can see, it does make an impact. Trying to get to 100% funded as best we can with, again, all the competing needs that we have. So staff is proposing that we add these payments back into the 2025 budget.
Commissioner Smers?
I'm going back to the earlier session.
Yes.
We're 84% with the
Mhm.
OPEB,
Mhm.
and then we're at 59% with the MERS pension.
Mhm.
Does it make sense to start moving some of this money from the OPEB over to MERS? I mean, it's just moving pennies around at this point. I realize it's a lot of pennies.
Right,
Don't
right.
get me wrong,
Yes,
but we're
yes.
still planning on spending $1 million in overpayment, not
Mhm.
additional payment.
Mhm.
I mean, does it make sense to start leaving 100,000 in OPEB, another 400,000 in MERS, or 250, or ladder step it down 100,000 each year,
Mhm.
something along those lines? Because at 100%, why are we putting money in an account when it's a installment payment versus the unfunded liability and the MERS pension? It was a question I had earlier running through my head, and I was just hanging on to it to ask you, because we didn't need to include the auditors and all that.
Mhm.
But is there a reason to continue with the 500,000 in the OPEB, or does it make sense to start moving it over, I guess is my ultimate question.
Sure. And I know Matt and I have had this discussion from time to time. I mean, ultimately, they're both unfunded liabilities that we want to get to 100% on both. We certainly could look into that, especially because, our OPEB is way above the 40%.
Right.
For PA 202. you know, I guess, I'm not sure, you know, if
I just-
one has 800,000, one is 200,000,
I just look at one that's
Um,
84%, we only need
mhm.
to be 40.
yeah.
The other one's at 59 and we're supposed to be at least 60. I'm just looking, would we benefit our MERS pension program better by moving some of that money over and getting beyond that 60? And I also realize too, that applying for the waiver, all depends on the markets. And we could be
Right.
65 one year and we could be 55 the next year. I fully understand that. I'm
Right.
just looking at the amount of unfunded liability that maybe we'd be better off.
Oh, Matt.
Chair, I just want to go on the record as I did not plant that question. That is a discussion that Dan and I have had
Yes.
in the past. And it's a worthy goal on both accounts to make additional payments. And I do think that we should think about the amounts. Maybe we do make a little higher contribution, extra payment to MERS rather than OPEB. That's something that we can consider. And if there's any commissioners that have thoughts on that, I'd love, Dan and I'd love to hear that.
And I can reach out to Plant Moran and MERS. Because the OPEB is a MERS trust, so, yeah, and our pension obviously is through MERS. To see if they have any suggestions on that as well, but, you know, the board ultimately would be approving this $1 million to this, our non-departmental, but, non-departmental department. So I think there would be some flexibility there, assuming the board felt comfortable. Again, if we did 800,000 to one, 200,000 to another, based on professionals' recommendations, and then what I could do is before we would move forward with that, I could provide any feedback from Plant Moran or MERS or any discussion staff has. But no, I think that's a good question. When we get to 100%, hopefully someday we will with our OPEB. That'll be 100% with that actuarial at that time, but then things change. So just because we're at 100% doesn't necessarily mean we would be fully funded either. Is something I've been coached on. It's just going to be that snapshot. Like if the markets were to tank, then, you know, now we're at 98 or what have you. But I do think that would be a good problem to have, though, being 100%
I
funded.
just see liabilities on the OPEB coming down because
Mhm.
2012 changes.
Right.
And then we're still adding this much.
Mhm.
And I will add that Matt didn't prompt me. I bombarded him at the break to ask the question. He said, we can talk about it later in the meeting. So, yeah, I guess that's me bringing it up. He didn't
Sure.
prompt me. I would save you from under the bus there.
Thank you.
So is the board okay with me kind of looking into this
Please
to
do.
see?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
No, I think it's a good question. We've kind of debated that for a while, but, you know, since we are over 80%, maybe it is time to try to address our pension a little more than our OPEB.
Yeah, I'd like to get us over that 60%.
I would too.
hump and stay there.
Trust me, I would love to
Right,
stop asking
right.
for the
So,
waiver
you know,
every
Jeff's
year and all the
suggestion-
paperwork. Mhm.
And we don't
Yes.
make this $1 million commitment until the end of the year anyway, right? So if things go sideways during the year, we may not allocate a full $1 million.
Well, so the timing of this, just so you know, assuming the board approves the budget in May, I would make that OPEB payment right away. Right after the board approves, so that next cycle of
Oh.
bills. But the pension one, we do wait until the end of the year, and we will make that November or early December.
So if you're going to recommend an adjustment in the level of OPEB overpayment, so to speak,
Yeah, yep.
we will look at that. Is that part of this budget then that we're going to be voting on?
Yeah, so that would be
Eventually
part of this, right?
Okay.
But the timing of our payments, you know, that's kind of at our discretion a little bit, so we could hold off if, you know, again, I think this is a good conversation to have and make sure everybody feels comfortable if we do decide to, you know, again, send a little more to the
Little bit.
pension, right? So we would have some time to discuss. Let's see, we've got, well, maybe even that first meeting in May. I could try and have some information for everyone and we could talk about it. And I don't know if it needs to be a formal recommendation or not. Again, the board is just approving this $1 million in that non-departmental department. So So,
Right. Jeff, did
Yeah,
you have?
just answer my
Go ahead.
question. You
Oh.
just answered my question. So, yes.
Okay, yeah, I want to know what's the go, no-go point for you,
Yes,
Dan, in
yep,
terms of making that determination?
sure. And if we don't make it until the next pay and cycle in May, that's fine. I mean, again, there's no requirements or anything. That's just kind of what we've done in the past.
I think,
And it's paid off.
yeah, the important thing is, in May, that the board allocates this $1 million
Mhm.
for extra payments for our liability, for OPEB and MERS. So as long as we have that decision made as part of the first quarter budget, then we can kind of await Dan's recommendation
Sure. Yep.
on how to slice that $1 million,
Yeah.
whether it be as presented, 500,000 to each, or something different.
So we're approving the million, not the 500 and 500.
Right. You're
Okay.
approving the change to that non-departmental
Okay,
department.
so do you need us to act to change this ratio or not?
I wouldn't think so, but obviously I would think we'd want some sort of consensus.
Oh, okay,
So we'll make the recommendation in the first meeting in May.
okay,
To set aside the $1 million of additional payments for long-term liabilities. And that's a non-departmental expense. And then hopefully, maybe we even get feedback from MERS
Mhm.
and Plant Moran prior to our first meeting in May.
Yeah. Yep.
On how to slice that.
okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Green, are you?
Yes, so if I understand this correctly, the OPEB is a contractual obligation. And the MERS is a statutory obligation.
So the OPEB, so again, going back to Gatsby says, many years ago said, government needs to start reporting what is this liability you owe to your retirees for health insurance? It's not a funding requirement at all.
Correct.
But, and actually, this allows me to bring up, so I was thinking about, and the auditors kind of alluded to this. We started funding this around, I think, 2007, I think they said was the first year.
Because we were at 0 in 06.
So Gatsby said we need to start reporting this, but it's not a requirement to fund it. And actually Wes Prater, who unfortunately recently passed away, he was a county commissioner and he was a road commissioner for a few years too. He was one of the driving forces with the board. It's not a funding obligation, but let's go ahead and try to address this. So the board at that time said, let's start addressing it. And we're at 80% funded. So that's, pretty great. And just because you're not obligated to fund it, I think it also shows we're making a commitment to our retirees that we're putting the money there. And again, when we're 100% funded or more, at some point, I hate to be morbid, but when the last
Right.
retiree passes away, at some point, I think, Blue Cross bills us and we pay us. At some point, you could probably use this trust to pay Blue Cross. When you get to that point, that'll be probably several decades from now, maybe. But, and again, these are good problems to have. So, I just feel really fortunate that the board at the time said, well, let's, you could put your head in the sand, right? And just say, we've never had to report this before. And, it is what it is. But we said, no, we're going to try and hit it head on. And I'm very appreciative that we have.
And Dan, for the record, GASB the acronym is
Yeah, the generally accepted standards board
for accounting.
for accounting, right?
And didn't they impose that because there were organizations where they were defaulting on meeting
Well-
that obligation?
So a lot of it came from, so FASB, they referenced that, that's the
Federal.
private sector version of GASB. GASB's for government. The private sector is already doing some of those things. So if somebody wanted to invest in a company, they're reporting, well, what obligations do you have to your retirees and so on? Government was not reporting that, but they said, why not? And obviously, no one's necessarily trying to invest in government, but how healthy is a government agency? You have all these unfunded liabilities that are not even showing up anywhere. And so GASB said, well, we should really be reporting it, and I agree. Obviously, it wasn't a good number and it's getting better, but, they just felt like if somebody's reading the road commission's financials, well, what sort of obligations do we have? You know, are we fiscally sound? Are we addressing these obligations? And now with these changes, now we're reporting all of it.
Gloria, do you have a question?
Just sort of clarification, Gatsby is Governmental Accounting Standards Board,
Or-
right?
Okay, yeah,
And what's the other one? FASB?
FASB, yes,
Okay, and that's the
which is for
federal?
the private sector.
Oh,
Mhm.
okay, for the.
And
private
usually the
sector.
private sector kind of drives things. And then government, they say, oh, we should do that too. So Gatsby's just saying, oh, we should do that too, to the tune of over 100 statements that they provided. You know, changes and things we've had to follow.
FASB is Financial Accounting Standards Board, but it's for private sector.
The Googles is a wonderful thing, huh?
Just did.
Great, yes,
Yep.
yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this? Okay, good discussion on this for sure. In summary, this is kind of a repeat or review, but so 2024 fiscal outcome was positive. Again, we thought our fund balance was going to be a little over 15 million, ended up being 26 million. Again, there was some carryover with that we've kind of talked about.
Yeah.
And then our Q1 adjustments, again, the initial budget that the board approved was a little over $10 million, which we all knew were a little uncomfortable about, and that's really as low as we like to go.
Mhm.
But we also cautioned the board, we think 2024 will end up in a better fiscal position and so on, which it did. And so again, with all these proposed adjustments, changes to projects, adding our OPEB and pension payments, everything else, we still are going to have a projected fund balance of about 18.8 million. And that's about 20% of expenditures. Again, Plant Moran would like, has given us a range of between 15 and 25%. So your fund balance as a percentage of expenditures, and 20%, you know, again, someone like me would like to see it at 40, but obviously we want to put money into the roads. We've got equipment we need to purchase. We want to attract and retain the best and brightest. So, you know, there's all these things that we need to address, of course. And 20% I think is a good place to be.
Other questions for Dan?
Oh, just, we're 5% the recommended.
Right. So some of these we've, I think last year maybe we started sharing it, and we can include them or not going forward. And I don't know if we do it for the Q2 or end of the year, but just kind of reiterating our balanced approach. Obviously, every dime we have that we can justify, we want it to go into the roads. Financial obligations, OPEB, pension, health insurance, whatever, you know, you name it, salt, fuel. Employees, again, we want the best and brightest to come to Washtenaw County Road Commission, so we need to make sure we're paying competitive wage with decent benefits. And then our equipment and facility, I think we've been doing a nice job with our road equipment, trying to get about 5 heavy trucks a year, trying to replace a grader or so a year. And our facilities, obviously, our new salt shed is very impressive and will last many, many years. But there are also many other needs that we have, you know, countywide. So we want to make sure we can do what we can to, you know, invest in all these things. So, so last year when we talked budget in Q1, a lot of concerns in the financial world. Of course, we had Ann Arbor schools with some of the challenges they were going through as far as accounting errors being made and budget problems. And, you know, I think they had to lay off a bunch of teachers. Anyway, so there was just concerns that were posed to myself by the board and just in general. I feel like every day I'm reading something about finance departments and issues that, you know, are coming up. And, you know, anyway, so we do our best to make sure that we're on solid ground. You know, I feel like we have really good procedures. Looking at the budget on a quarterly basis, of course, staff is looking at it more frequently than that, but at least having a discussion with the board for you to have the opportunity to ask questions and just make sure if there's anything that is concerning or, you know, you want clarification on. I think it's always good to have that dialogue, which doesn't need to end here. I mean, if you have things that come to mind, you know, feel free to call Matt or myself, send an email, and we gladly address any questions or concerns. You know, I feel like we have a really good process internally that we meet as a leadership team. And then I meet with each department and we have several meetings. And like I said, you know, Brent's done a great job with that spreadsheet with all the projects and just a lot to keep up with. But I feel like we have a good, efficient process internally, and you know, our meetings, you know, truly are open dialogues as far as you know, okay, Brent, what roads do we need to address? And, you know, kind of, sometimes we have to pick and choose, of course, because the budget isn't endless, but, you know, I just feel like we have really good discussions as far as what we can justify, what we can carry over and so on. And I know he's got an unfunded list too that probably continues to grow, but, occasionally we look at that as well. I like our 2-year budget look ahead. You know, we want to know what's coming. You know, we kind of know what projects we want to do or we have, you know, funding for, but how does that compare with everything else that we'd like to do? But you also don't want to dwell on that because once we present those numbers to you for those out years, they change. So, you know, there could be new funding from Lansing or whatever the case may be. So, but it's always good to kind of look ahead and plan for that. If we see some challenges, we can start addressing it now. I also like to think, not to toot my own horn, we have a good track record as far as our budget to actual. And, you know, we sit up here and tell the board, you know, we feel like these represent worst case scenarios, and usually that's correct. And so I'm really proud of that. And it's always nice in the Q1 that we can add things back. Not always, but most of the time we can add some projects back and some other things that we'd like to do. And with all the competing interests we have, you know, we want to be responsible with our fund balance. And I liked how Plant Moran mentioned, in case of emergencies, you need to have that fund balance. You know, again, tornado in Dexter, oh, we don't have any funds for that. No, absolutely. We were right there right away to, you know, step in and assist all of our other partners. And we want to make sure we can continue that, of course.
Yeah, another great example, not great, but something that happened recently is the ice storms up north. I know a lot of road agencies had to do a lot of additional expenditures to address what Mother Nature threw at them, whether it be freezing rain or down trees. A number of road commissions had to address a lot of different things that they weren't planning to do, and that healthy fund balances helps us do that.
For sure.
We were very fortunate. We did not have to deal with those things.
But tornado season is in front of us too.
Exactly.
It is. Just continuing with that. So, you know, I say trust me or trust my staff or what have you, but you certainly don't want to just go on that, of course. And so there are plenty of other outside agencies that are looking over our numbers, the main being Plant Moran, of course. We have an annual audit. And, you know, they really get into the weeds on a lot of things, and, you know, we need to justify our actions, make sure we're following GASB, you know, that there are no material misstatements or errors that could impact things. So CRASIF, the County Road Association Self-Insurance Fund for Workers' Comp, they audit us every year. More just as it relates to workers' comp and what type of, you know, activities our employees are on, but they audit us each year. MDOT also audits us for the state trunk line contract, and you'd be surprised of all the information that they are asking for. And of course, we have the Act 51 report that there's a state agency that reviews that as well. So you have all these outside entities that are looking at what we're doing to make sure that we're doing it properly and, you know, hopefully validating the work we're doing. We've tried to automate our processes as much as possible. Some of that has, you know, there's been some limitations, and we'll talk about that next a little bit, but, you know, you want to try to, wherever possible, get the data entry out of the equation and automate the processes. And just because the process is automated, you should have good checks and balances to make sure the information is correct. So we have a lot of checks and balances that we use. You know, you can't just kind of blindly trust things. You want to make sure that, you know, does this make sense? Is it accurate? So checks and balances are definitely very important to finance. Experienced and knowledgeable staff, you know, I have the good fortune of working with Tracy and Jamie, and they are outstanding employees, and we work well, the three of us. And so, you know, I think that's some of the issues, quite frankly, with what I'm seeing with other agencies, with their finance folks. You know, they may be either new to accounting or new to the organization. They don't have good processes or good people, good communication, and then problems are happening. So, you know, I feel very fortunate that, you know, again, to have Jamie and Tracy, and like I said, we work well together. So, networking resources, the County Road Association has listservs that if I ever have a question or an issue, I can pose that question. And I do feel the road commissions across the state are very, you know, you can reach out at any time. It's not necessarily like I do things better than Livingston. It's like, here's how I do things. I'll share it with you, and you could choose to follow it or not, or tweak it. But I'm very appreciative of the support network that I have with the other road commissions, because you don't always see that. So, and then we're constantly auditing ourselves. Probably every day we're auditing ourselves and our work, and each other too. I'll say, hey, Tracy, what about this? Or, you know, out of our payroll for the quarter, I forgot what it was, maybe like over $5 million. It was off by a penny. So, so you kind of laugh, but you know, I like to, within reason, of course. I'm not going to spend, you know, 5 days looking for it, but you know, usually, Joanne, right? Usually there's something behind the numbers, right? And we were able to figure out what you know, the difference was. But you know, same with our cash. You know, I'm reconciling cash on a monthly basis to what the county's books show. And you know, if there's out of, you know, $25 million, if it's $100 off, I want to know where that is. So, but I wouldn't have it any other way. So we're always looking at the work that we're doing, and like I said, auditing ourselves so that we're ready when the actual auditors come in. We've done a lot of that, and we've caught, you know, 95% of any issues. Okay, so as far as the budget, the next steps, we will have on the May 6th agenda approval item for the budget. If there's any changes, if there's any significant changes from what we presented today, we'll communicate that to the board. So again, the year-to-date 2025 numbers will change slightly. But if there's anything that changes enough that has an impact on what we've shared with you, we'll definitely point that out so that you know what's different from this presentation. And then Q2, we'll look at our numbers there. We'll hopefully have all of our township agreements in place. So usually we have a nice adjustment there. If there's anything else project-wise, I imagine all of our bids and things will be in. And then we'll look at 2026 and 2027. So it's always a nice opportunity to kind of sit down and kind of look at several things. And with that.
Any questions? No.
Yes.
Commissioner Green?
Just point of information. GASB applies to government agencies only, right?
I'm sorry?
So GASB applies to government agencies only, right?
Yes, that's correct. And the FASB is for private sector.
Okay.
Yes.
Commissioner Yamas?
And I probably doesn't, what will be included in May 6th too is the recommendation possibly from Plant Moran about the
Those additional payments.
yeah, the
Correct.
additional payments.
Yep, we definitely will have some, I hope, I mean, we've got several weeks, but
Yeah.
it's my plan to reach out today or tomorrow and just get feedback from some of the other professionals to see if there's, and the answer might be it's whatever we want to do, which, we'll have some discussions internally too, but, I do plan on talking about what makes the most sense with those additional payments at that time.
Thank you. Great presentation like usual.
Mhm.
Commissioner Smers.
It's not really a question, more of a statement. In the last few years, working with Dan, I've gained a ton of confidence in your ability and your staff, so you telling us about everyone else in your staff is important, but know that we know it as well. We feel that way about you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We, can speak for everyone on that one.
Okay.
Two, worked with a lot of organizations. I have never seen any organization that has as much mutual respect as you guys do in this organization. It's refreshing. So,
Yeah.
thank you.
Well, I appreciate your sentiments and yeah, you do really feel like you're part of a team and, my career could have taken me various paths and private sector, sometimes you're climbing the corporate ladder and that can get really nasty and just, everybody's out for themselves, but no, I've always felt a lot of support from this agency. And, I don't know, because we're small, maybe it's a little bit easier, it's more like a family sort of thing. Usually when somebody is hired here, I usually say, welcome to the road commission family. I feel like that, they were all almost like family members and, but yeah, no, I think it's a great place to work for some of the things you said,
And you've been here how many years?
over 30.
Oh, geez.
Long time.
Long
Yes.
time. Yeah, that means that, yeah, you better have a good replacement, better be as good
Yeah.
as you.
I know, there you go.
Right.
Any other questions for Dan? Comments? Commissioner Green?
Thank you for all your efforts. You do a great job with
My
everything
pleasure.
and your staff.
Absolutely.
All right. Any parting words for us?
Well, I think
He's gonna be up next.
yeah, we have another item to discuss. I think you're not rid of
Acumatica?
me quite yet.
Is Dan doing Acumatica too?
Is, I can kick it off as well.
That sounds like a video game, Acumatica.
Yeah.
It may be. So, I wanted to, the board aware,
Physically or virtually? Just go ahead. Sorry, go
yeah,
ahead,
our next agenda item, Chair, if that's okay. We can
please.
move on. All right. So, Dan and I have been talking about our financial software that we currently use, which is
Mhm.
Precision. And, Dan is here to kind of talk about the future, as we look, to things like, eventually Dan is going to retire and he wants to leave us in a very good place. I know, exactly.
Can I make a motion?
Right.
Have the authority.
So with that, I wanted to give Dan an opportunity to talk about a request we're going to be making at the next board meeting for this a new financial software called Acumatica. Go ahead, Dan.
So I'd like to start with a little bit of background. And I know it's been a long meeting, so this promise, this won't be too long unless there's questions.
Oh,
So-
yeah, it's our fault.
Yeah, right, there you go, right. Those darn questions,
Jeff.
no.
Jeff.
So when I first started here in 94, we had our own internal software. And basically, it wasn't Chris Quinter, like his position was actually a COBOL programmer.
Oh,
Not to
wow.
get too technical, but COBOL is a programming language. And it was all in-house software. So if we needed, say, oh, we want to offer direct deposit to our employees, the staff person would have to do all the coding for that and so on, which is pretty antiquated, probably even in 1994. But anyway, so that particular employee left, and we had to make a decision. Did we want to hire another COBOL programmer and keep our current system or look elsewhere? So the decision was made, and again, COBOL was kind of antiquated programming, probably, in the,
DOS.
yes, exactly, right. So probably going back to like the 80s, but, so we made the decision, that business model doesn't work anymore. So we looked for other financial software packages that were available. And at the time, there were really two. One is called Cogitate, and a lot of the smaller road commissions use Cogitate, and the other was Precision. And Precision, a lot of the larger road commissions used it. At the time, they seemed fairly progressive. It fit within our budget and so on, and it just made sense at the time. So this was in 2002, we went to Precision. So we've been on them, 23 years. We've been with Precision for 23 years. And again, I think when we first went that direction, I kind of feel they were fairly progressive and maybe a little bit ahead of Cogitate. Again, there weren't a lot of options that we had. But fast forward to a couple years ago even, just kind of some issues with really both Precision and Cogitate. The County Road Association apparently was getting a lot of complaints and so on, so they formed a financial software committee made up of people like myself. Actually, Chris Quinter is on that committee as well. And basically, the committee was charged with evaluating financial software and seeing if there's other options. They were clear to say this is not to replace Precision or Cogitate, because a lot of folks were kind of, no, I don't want to make any changes. This is just to offer like other options. And so, I've actually served on the committee for a while as well. And the committee is going on, I think, 3 years old now. So the committee has evaluated several software packages and came up with a project called Sage and then Acumatica. And so we formed an internal committee, a very small committee, more of the power users, and are currently evaluating the Acumatica product. We like what we see. There's a lot of enthusiasm from staff. It's a modern software. Some of the things with Precision, some of the issues we had is not keeping up with technology. Their support wasn't as great. They're a smaller company, and really they had, I felt, two go-to programmers. One of those programmers left, and while they replaced that person, I don't think they replaced them adequately. So really, we have one go-to person with, I feel, a lot of our issues. And, she's probably been there 30 years as well. The president of Precision is retiring, so that kind of concerns me a little bit. They are no longer supporting our timekeeping, which we are fine, but they're saying if there's an issue, we could be in a little bit of trouble. So there's a bit of sense of urgency to, move this initiative along with Acumatica. They have very poor documentation in their modules. If you go to their help for, say, accounts receivable, there's not much there. It's very confusing and is not being updated. We would get upgrades from them the last few years, and an upgrade's a good thing, right? It's going to fix things and so on, but actually it ends up causing more problems than good. So anyway, it just seems like it's time. And, this modern software that we're looking at is web-based. It'll further our automation. We've implemented a lot of things, but, there's a lot more that we could get rid of paper and, have more efficient processes. Just a lot of things that a new system should be able to do for us. And I mentioned it at the spring luncheon. That's maybe the first time some of the commissioners have heard, but Matt and I just felt, let's bring it up today and see if commissioners had any questions or concerns about, why or, anything involving this.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be a change for the better. We're very excited about this new financial software solution. It will involve everyone in the organization will be impacted because it doesn't include payroll. It is a web-based solution and it's an international company, essentially. based in the US, but they have clients all over the world. We feel like this is going to be a great solution for both. It does both private sector and public sector. There's a lot of cost accounting, budget tracking, project tracking that we do a lot of things. One of the things that caught my attention, it's a spreadsheet killer. What that means is we use Precision, but then we export a lot of data out of Precision into spreadsheets and manipulate it so that it's more usable for us. Our hope is that this will be something that we don't have to manipulate, that there will be all the tools within the new software. And what we're recommending is that we move into a subscription with this new software. And in addition, the resources to onboard us are local. So there's a firm that we're working with that's out of Lansing that is going to help us understand. They're going to come along and walk alongside of us, understand our workflow and how best to use this Acumatica as part of it. So it'll be essentially a request for the subscription and this consulting fee to walk alongside us to onboard us, which will take in between 6 to 9 months. So we're hoping that would all take place by the end of the year.
So what is it you need from us?
Ultimately, we're not
supposed to,
asking,
but I'm convinced.
yeah, we're not asking for,
Know what you need.
yeah, the
and how-
board will not use this other than you'll see the output of us. This is a recommendation we're going to make at the next meeting in May.
Yeah.
That ultimately will be a consent item, and it's a recommendation from staff to move to this Acumatica, and we want to make you aware of it before it hits the consent agenda.
Right.
Oftentimes, we're doing PO requests for software and things of that nature that end up on consent. We don't really talk about it, but this is a major change. And we mentioned it at spring training, and we wanted to give the board an opportunity to ask questions and just be more aware of the change that we're making.
I assume you'll give us a price tag with this in
Yes.
May. Okay.
Correct.
Yes.
Commissioner McCollum.
I just want to say, I think it's important to keep abreast of new technology that will help with efficiency,
Right.
which that's just historically what I've seen here since I've been here, that you keep abreast of things, and I think it's important to do that.
And as I mentioned, we went with Precision in 2002.
Mhm.
Technology's changed a little bit from then to now.
Yeah, how many
Wanna make
cell
sure-
phones have we had?
Yeah, right, no, exactly. I was still faxing things. And we want to make sure that we have this modern software, because every day it seems like we're more reliant on software and technology. We want to make sure we have a modern software that's really going to do everything we need it to do, hopefully. We want to expand things for our supervisors and foremen. There's dashboards that would hopefully make their jobs easier to do estimates for projects. And I mean, the possibilities are endless, really. And like I said, the group that I'm working with internally, very enthusiastic. Several road commissions have either signed on the dotted line or are probably about where we are, or maybe a little behind. And also CRA did receive some seed money for the software committee. So I already had several conversations to see if, again, if we're one of the first to implement, I think that benefits all the other road commissions. So could some of that seed money be used for some of our implementation? There's no promises or anything, of course, but, I think, I've got the attention of some in CRA that, yes, that would be money well spent. What else are they going to use the money for? So,
Right.
so we'll continue to pursue that as well. But yeah, I think it's time, and like I said, we're real excited, and it's going to be a tough 6 to 9 months, but hopefully, when we get to the finish line, everybody will feel really good about what we have for many years to come.
I did just want to thank Dan for his leadership on this. He is excited, which is a big change, particularly for Dan. That is a big change, and it just speaks to his character. Knowing that he is close to retirement. Some folks could just say, all right, I'm just gonna ride it out. We're gonna ride precision until it
Figure it
doesn't work
out.
anymore, and the next person can figure it out. And Dan is not taking that attitude. He is saying, I'm gonna figure this out so that we are well positioned and I'll feel good about handing the torch over to the next person.
Absolutely.
And I just want to thank you for that, Dan. And thank you for leading us on this venture.
Commissioner Green, and then we have one more agenda item, so we need to be
Thank you.
efficient.
Dan, you mentioned this is something that's going to impact the entire organization.
Yes.
I'm assuming the employees are on board with this.
Yeah, I mean, we've had some discussions at our leadership team meetings. That was, I believe, one of our goals
Mhm.
that we established as that particular group. And, you know, a majority of the employees would, for timekeeping. You know, as long as we have a straightforward way of allowing them to process their time, you know, I think they would be fine with it. But the goal is maybe there's more tools we can provide, you know, just one thing. I always thought it'd be nice if employees could, you know, view and print their W-2s anytime they want from any year. And so there might be some capabilities to do those type of things as well. So, yeah, I've not heard too many issues yet, you know, when you implement something like this, obviously you engage like whoever's using whatever module, say inventory or equipment. So we'll definitely be engaging the employees to get their input and, you know, allow them to, help with the design of everything.
Thank you.
Commissioner Yamas?
So this is a new program, right, that.
It would be new
it's
to
a new
us,
product,
but it's a
new to us,
global-
but
it's
it's
a
been out
global-
for a while?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's a
Okay, yeah, so,
huge, yes.
yeah, I was in the position that somebody left and I had to get all new software, bring it
Oh,
all up to date
okay.
in one of my previous positions. So this is really appreciated to get everything up on board.
Yep.
So hopefully it works out.
Very good, Dan. Thank you.
Yep.
Here,
Sure, go ahead.
if it's okay with you, I just want to take a couple minutes. And we had a few staff members that Brent Schlack was going to introduce in our engineering department, our project managers that didn't have the opportunity previously. So.
Yep. Brent Schlack, Director of Engineering. Yeah, we have a couple staff. Why don't you come on up? So we have Nico Robison. He's a project manager within our design and construction. He was hired in August of last year, 24. Just to give you a
And you're
reference.
still here. That's a good
Yeah.
sign.
Things are great here. I can't leave.
Okay.
He's just to give you a reference on some projects he's working on. So he's working on the Tyler Road project that we have. He's the PM on that project, and then he's working on some culvert projects. And then moving forward, he's on our Hewitt Road reconstruction project. And Scioto Church and Zeeb, the roundabout project that we have for next year. So that's some, just to give you context on what Nico's working on. And we have Elizabeth Taylor, Beth Taylor. She's a project manager within our permit section. So we just hired her on just recently. And she has a wealth of experience from permitting to construction to materials testing. And so she's really gonna help that group out. So, yeah. So you wanna say hi to the
Want to
board?
say a few words?
Sure. Like you said, I'm Elizabeth Taylor, but you can call me Beth. And like Brent said, I come, this is the third county road commission that I've worked for. So I have experience with Washtenaw or Wayne County and Oakland County. On top of that, some 20 years of consulting experience as well. So
Welcome aboard. Good
Thank
to see
you.
you again. I saw you at spring training. So
yes,
it's
I was able to introduce myself to you as well as Commissioner
Yeah.
McCollum too. I sat at her table. So unfortunately, I disabled the table, I think, because I was a noob and didn't know any of those people. For the, so because they averaged it, I think I brought our table down.
Oh.
I was in
Yeah.
the same boat.
Yeah. Great.
A little bit more about me. I was also involved with the Stony Creek
Yeah.
Road Bridge project that
Oh.
was last fall. I also come with consulting experience. I was originally at Materials Testing Consultants, which is somebody we work with a lot here. Before that, my education is from the University of Michigan. I'm a local guy. I went to Saline High School, so really proud of the work that I've been able to do so far and excited to continue learning.
Well, it's belated, but welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, Brent?
No, I appreciate it. And, yeah, it's just important for me to put a face with a name and,
Absolutely.
you know, you'll see those projects coming before you.
All right, thank you. Mr. McDonnell,
That concludes our agenda.
all right. A motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. We are adjourned. Thanks, everybody. See you at 1 o'clock for the regular meeting.
Thank you.
For such a short.